Good morning, and I'd like to call this hearing to order this morning, and I'll recognize myself for an opening statement. Anyone who focuses on energy issues in America, I believe, has been amazed at recent discovery of resources that make it possible for America to be energy independent, both generating electricity and producing fuel for transportation purposes. Certainly, supply and demand affects price, and if we can control price, we can be more competitive in the global marketplace, strengthen our economy, and create jobs. That is certainly a goal to which we all aspire. Now, we've had several hearings about supply in this subcommittee, and today we're going to focus on demand and specifically energy efficiency. In fact, today's hearing is entitled American Energy Security and Innovation, an assessment of private sector successes and opportunities in energy-efficient technologies. Just as we have been successful in finding additional resources for energy production, we have also made great strides in energy efficiency, and we can do even more. History teaches us that nothing is more efficient than the free market. The only thing you need to spur innovation that improve energy efficiency is profit-seeking companies responding rationally to high energy bills. Any company that doesn't use energy as wisely as possible will lose ground to a competitor that does. This is why free economies are the most efficient and have the lowest energy inputs per units of gross domestic product, when you contrast that particularly with centrally planned economies, which are certainly not as efficient. We all understand that government has a very important role to play and has contributed much in this area, such as utilizing the latest advances to improve efficiency in federal buildings and in conducting energy efficiency research. And all of us are fans of the Energy Savings Performance Contract program over at DOE. It continues to do a great job, and we look forward to making sure that it continues to make that kind of contribution. We have a great panel of witnesses today. We have 3 panels, and on the first panel, we're very fortunate to have 2 United States senators. We have Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who's been a leader in the energy sector, and Senator, we really appreciate your taking time to be with us today. And Senator Shaheen of New Hampshire was given a speaking engagement this morning, and she's on her way. And it's not seldom that we have 2 senators over here, so we're always going to pay particular attention to what they say because, as they say, the House and the Senate need to work closely together on all these issues. So we're excited about the witnesses this morning, and I'll introduce the 3 panels as we come to them. And with that, Mr. Rush, I'd recognize you for an opening statement.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's hearing on the successes and opportunities in energy efficiency technology. It is my sincere hope that after hearing from today's panel of witnesses, members from both sides of the aisle will be able to come together and move the country's energy policy forward by working to enact common sense energy efficiency legislation. Mr. Chairman, I remain optimistic that this subcommittee may return to the days of enacting bipartisan and comprehensive energy policy, like we did most recently in 2005 and 2007. And I believe that the area of energy efficiency may in fact be the opportunity for us to do so. The story of energy efficiency is one that is filled with success stories that have really helped propel our nation forward by making us more independent and more secure, while also reducing the cost of energy, both in our pocketbooks and its impact on the environment. According to a recent AESI study, U.S. energy consumption in 2010 was less than half of what it would have been without the energy efficiency improvements made since 1970. Mr. Chairman, while today's hearing focuses on the progress made in the private sector, let us not forget that it was the leadership of state and federal governmental activities and that paved the way for many of these energy efficiency successes. DOE rulemaking spurred dozens of national efficiency standards for appliances and equipment since 1987. AECEE rather, found that these existing standards will provide net savings of $1.1 trillion through 2035, while also reducing carbon pollution by the equivalent amount of taking approximately 118 coal-fired power plants offline by that same year. In fact, in 2010, overall U.S. energy use was 7% less than it would have been without these existing standards. However, Mr. Chairman, it is important to note that the AECEE study also found, and I quote, "the prospect for future improvements is large," end of quote. In fact, the report estimates that additional energy efficiency efforts could reduce U.S. energy use by 42 to 59% over current projections, which will create over 1 million jobs and increase U.S. GDP by $100 to $200 billion by the year 2050. So, Mr. Chairman, it is important that the federal government does not abdicate its responsibility, its leadership role of promoting, of encouraging, of enticing interested stakeholders to continue with the progress that have already been made in energy efficiency technologies, so that we may keep moving forward, moving our nation forward. We have a rich and strong legacy to stand on, Mr. Chairman, and let us not abandon the work that has already been done. Energy efficiency has proven to be the low-hanging fruit that may indeed, as I said earlier, bring both sides together in a legislative manner, while also making our nation safer, more secure, and more attentive to the impacts of climate change. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hearing from these outstanding members of the other body, our nation's leaders, and I look forward to this hearing. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rush. At this time, I recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Upton, for a 5-minute opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both of our senators for being here. Thanks for crossing the Capitol this morning to provide your perspective on energy efficiency innovation. Energy efficiency is not only a bipartisan issue, but as your presence here today demonstrates, there's bicameral interest as well. You know, for an economy to thrive, it does need energy. In fact, increased energy consumption is often a harbinger of economic growth, a very good thing by any measure. When we talk about energy efficiency, I believe our goal is to maintain and enhance our economic growth by finding ways to maximize the ways that we use energy, to get the most bang for the buck. Energy efficiency measures are some of the simplest and most affordable ways to address U.S. energy demand. The U.S. has steadily improved its energy productivity as a result of advances in technology driven by private sector innovation. Reducing waste and consuming less energy are common sense strategies to cut costs which is why the industrial and manufacturing sectors have undertaken significant efforts to improve efficiency and reap the resulting economic benefits. But significant energy efficiency opportunities remain, and we will hear about some of those opportunities as well as the challenges from our distinguished panelists today. We've got to remember that as the sequester takes center stage this week, that the federal government is the nation's largest user of energy, and sensibly utilizing energy savings techniques can significantly reduce the amount of taxpayer dollars spent on federal energy costs. So on behalf of all of our colleagues, I welcome both of you here and yield my balance of my time to Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Whitfield and Ranking Member Rush. Thank you for holding this hearing today. Over the past 2 years, I've become increasingly more interested in this topic of energy efficiency and look forward to hearing our witnesses' testimony this morning. There's a lot more that the federal government, in particular, could be doing to become more energy efficient, since we truly are the largest energy consumer in the nation. That's why I've partnered with Mr. Welch of Vermont, who also serves on this committee, to form a caucus solely focused on advancing energy efficiency in a way that helps the environment and the taxpayer. Our caucus focuses on performance contracting, whether they be energy savings performance contracts or utility energy service contracts. ESPCs and UESCs allow private companies to perform energy upgrades by taking on all the risk associated with those improvements. The company only gets paid when the monetary savings materialize. They're a win-win for government and the taxpayer, creating private sector jobs along the way. I truly believe that energy efficiency is an issue that Republicans and Democrats can come together on, as we have done in Colorado. And during times when this city can seem so partisan to the rest of the country, I think we should jump at this opportunity to do so. I'll point out, however, that there is one minor impediment to moving forward with ESPCs in the way that many of us in this room would like to do so. While OMB does not score ESPCs, CBO does, even though it saves money and has no appropriated dollars with it. It's unfortunately restricting our ability to utilize a tool that makes complete sense during an economic downturn and during a time when the federal government is trying to find a way to save money. I look forward to working with everyone on this issue and the others in this room as we discuss what we can do to encourage energy efficiency here in Congress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield the remainder of my time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gardner. And at this time, I recognize the ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At its heart, energy efficiency is about reducing waste, doing more with less. This frees up energy supplies, saves money, and reduces dangerous carbon pollution. Energy efficiency is good for consumers, good for business, good for our economy and job creation, and good for fighting dangerous climate change. A recent report from the International Energy Agency highlights the critical role of energy efficiency in slowing dangerous climate change. IEA concluded that if the world does not take action to reduce carbon pollution by 2017, then the energy infrastructure existing at that time will make it impossible to limit warming to 2 degrees Celsius. In other words, we have just 4 years to take serious actions to reduce carbon pollution, or we will be locked into a path forward that is going to lead us to devastating climate change. But if we invest now in energy efficiency, we can give ourselves more time. According to the IEA, the rapid deployment of energy efficiency measures would give the world at least 5 additional years to develop long-term solutions. IEA also found that there are huge efficiency opportunities available. Cost-effective energy efficiency measures using technology available today could reduce expected future energy use by over 40%. These measures, of course, would save consumers and businesses over $11 trillion through 2050. 2/3 of the potential energy efficiency savings remain untapped. Existing efficiency standards will provide net savings of over $1 trillion through 2035 while reducing annual carbon emissions by 470 million metric tons. That's equivalent to the annual emissions from over 100 coal-fired power plants. Without these existing standards, the typical household's electricity use would be about 35% higher. Buildings account for about 40% of our total energy consumption, and there's a lot we could do to make them more efficient. Tools such as efficiency include building codes, performance goals, information disclosure, technical support, innovative financing approaches, and reduction of market barriers. We're going to hear today from two very distinguished members of the Senate. Senator Shaheen worked together with Senator Portman on a bipartisan bill that includes many good ideas. Senator Murkowski in the last Congress worked with Senator Bingaman on a package of consensus energy efficiency standards. We should build on both of these bipartisan efforts. We need to be ambitious. Study after study has identified a myriad of ways we could save energy, save money, and reduce carbon pollution. I look forward to hearing the testimony from our two senators and other witnesses today and working on a bipartisan basis to do something that I think is in the best interest of the American people. Yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman, and that concludes the opening statement. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our first panel of witnesses. They've already been introduced, but I'll do it again. We have Senator Lisa Murkowski, the U.S. Senator from Alaska, who's ranking member of Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And we have the Honorable Jeanne Shaheen, U.S. Senator from New Hampshire. And as has already been stated, both of you all have worked on these issues in a very bipartisan way. And so we welcome you to this committee. It's my understanding that when you finish your opening statements that you both have some other responsibilities, so we will not be asking you any questions, but do look forward to your testimony. And Senator Murkowski, I'll start with you and recognize you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Rush, Mr. Waxman, Mr. Upton, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning to focus on energy efficiency specifically. I don't know how you do this, but the fact that you actually have your cups this morning that talk about energy efficiency, I don't know if you do this for every hearing over here, but kudos to the committee here for being on subject. You note in your introduction of me that as the ranking member on the Energy Committee, I would obviously have an interest in this, but coming from the state of Alaska, as I do, where in some of our remote rural communities, Alaskan families are spending up to 47% of the family's budget on energy. There is every reason to be efficient. There is every reason to squeeze everything that you can out of the energy that comes our way. So I've taken a very keen interest in it. And as a consumer of energy, as we all are, we should all be focused on energy and what we can do to make a difference. Before I get into the specifics of energy efficiency, I want to offer some context for it in the position of a broader, more comprehensive look at energy policy. I brought with me today one of the Hill's bestsellers. This is Energy 2020, a brilliant piece of 115 pages focusing on all things energy. And it's not very often around here that we actually see 200 recommendations on energy policy come out, a focus on energy as the bigger picture in terms of what we can do to strengthen our economy. I would commend it to you. It's available on my website. But let me give you the Reader's Digest condensed version. It starts with a simple premise that energy is good. You can distill it in a bumper sticker, but think about it, it provides the basis for modern society. It allows us to lead happy and productive lives. It allows us to produce food, to manufacture, to communicate, to move. It's all good. And to give you 5 easy principles when we talk about energy, we should strive to make energy abundant, affordable, clean, diverse, and secure. And to accomplish all this, again, I outline about 200 different recommendations, but as we think about energy policy here in this Congress and how to move forward in an area that really can help us be more efficient in our use. Just think of it in context of these 5 attributes as a way to evaluate legislative actions that affect energy. And I would hope that taken together, we can agree that these are the attributes that should allow our policies to advance. Now, as your focus on American energy security and innovation reminds us, energy or efficiency is more than just driving energy consumption down. As I say in the blueprint here, using energy more efficiently is akin to developing more fuel. It also encompasses the more efficient production of energy. Now, we must do more. We must do more to discourage the inefficiencies that I think we see oftentimes with regulation and how that is introduced into our energy supply chain. Our aim with energy efficiency policies should be to require less energy per unit of gross domestic product. And it's worth emphasizing that what we want is a rising GDP here as a measure of increasing prosperity. To underscore for the discussion of efficiency, we must never lose sight of the fact that we want our nation, in fact, we want the world, to be more prosperous. And we know prosperity is an aid to peace and human development, and energy is an aid to prosperity. So the title for the hearing today reminds us that we must see efficiency within the context of energy security and innovation. I am honored to be here with Senator Shaheen, who has been a leader on efficiency during her tenure on the Energy Committee with me. She continues to work with Senator Rob Portman on their version of a comprehensive energy efficiency bill. It was, and it thankfully remains, a bipartisan effort to make progress in an area where you all have pointed out agreement is eminently possible. And I think that we saw this as the last Congress waned down. We managed to pass an efficiency bill, the American Energy Manufacturing Technical Corrections Act. There were only 2 members of Congress that voted against that. So again, when you think about those things that we can do together, we should be looking to efficiency. So where do we go on efficiency this year as we look at ways to boost the efficiency of everything that we're doing, whether it's from the buildings here, our vehicles, our appliances, everything? The bill that Senator Shaheen and Senator Portman will offer, I think, provides a promising path that is worthy of our consideration. You will see compliments of their work with reports from private sector associations like the Business Roundtable, the National Association of Manufacturers, the Alliance to Save Energy. We must continue to encourage outside stakeholders to reach these voluntary consensus agreements so that efficiency does not become synonymous with this top-down approach of mandates that are issued by the federal government. I think given the constraints on federal finances that has been mentioned and the failure of mandates to deliver on certain promised results, those of us in the federal government should also put our own house in order. And as a start, I'm going to be calling upon the GAO to review current funding and past performance of residential, commercial, and industrial energy efficiency programs within DOE, and then propose new authorization levels based on this review. Now, finally, you have appropriately called attention with this hearing to private sector successes and opportunities. And as President Reagan's administration reminded us more than 25 years ago, the greatest gains in energy efficiency come from the private sector in a growing economy. So here, the government's priority should be the removal of barriers that stand in the way of their investments and the economic growth that make them possible. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to come over. I think it is important that we share our ideas between the 2 houses, certainly amongst members and our parties, and I welcome the opportunity for future dialogue on energy efficiency and all things energy. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning.
Well, Senator Murkowski, thanks so much for your testimony and your continued leadership, and welcome Senator Shaheen. And at this time, I'd like to recognize you for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Rush, and the members of the committee. Thank you for holding this very important hearing today. I'm especially pleased to be joined by Congressman Waxman, the ranking member of the full committee, and I was pleased to see Chairman Upton here as well. And I share the views, I think, of all of you that we've just heard from that energy efficiency is a win-win-win. We can save energy, save pollution, we can protect our national security, and we can also create jobs. And so it's a great place to start, and it has bipartisan support. I'm also pleased to be joining my former ranking member. I served for 4 years on the Energy Committee with Senator Murkowski, and I know what great leadership she's provided on this issue as well as so many other energy issues. She pointed out that with the assistance of this committee, last session we passed the American Energy Manufacturing Technical Corrections Act, which is a mouthful, but it included many energy efficiency provisions, including several from the Shaheen-Portman legislation that really helped to lay a foundation, I think, for further discussion about energy efficiency. I want to talk a little bit about the legislation that Senator Portman and I have introduced, but I want to begin by putting it in a little bit of context, as Senator Murkowski did. I think all of us would agree that we need a comprehensive national energy policy. We remain overly dependent on foreign oil. We remain reliant on an outdated energy infrastructure that harms American businesses and gives our overseas competitors an advantage. I think we have to utilize a wide range of energy sources, including natural gas, oil, nuclear, and renewables like wind, biomass, and solar to address our future energy needs, and that this gives us an energy future that is more stable and gives us a stronger economy. As you all will highlight in today's hearing, we can't just talk about the supply side of energy. We also have to talk about how we consume energy once we have it. And efficiency, as we all know, is the cheapest, fastest way to deal with our energy needs and our economy's energy independence. And I wanted to start with a couple of examples that I think are important as we think about the successes we can achieve through energy efficiency. One of the most well-known is the recent makeover of the Empire State Building, which reduced energy costs by $4.4 million a year. It created 252 jobs, and it's estimated to have saved 4,000 metric tons of carbon emissions. They did things like install 6,500 new windows, a chiller plant retrofit, new building controls, and a web-based tenant energy management system. I had the opportunity not too long ago to visit a New Hampshire company called Highliner Foods, which is in Portsmouth on the seacoast of New Hampshire. It's an energy-intensive seafood processing plant that requires a tremendous amount of energy to operate. At one point, the 180,000 square foot facility consumed roughly 2 megawatts of power at any given time during normal operations. So next to the cost of personnel and fish, their biggest cost was energy. But by installing efficient lighting, new boilers, and various demand response techniques, the company has made great strides in reducing its energy consumption, which allows them to expand their business footprint in the state and be more cost-effective in their production. We can also benefit from those companies that are producing energy efficiency technologies. We have a company in New Hampshire called Warner Power that has made the first breakthrough in transformers in over 100 years. It's called a hexaformer. And if we look at where we lose power, about 5% of all electricity generated in the United States is lost through inefficiencies in transformers. So with wide-scale use of this transformer, the company estimates that 1.5% of all transformer energy losses could be eliminated, saving the country 60 terawatts of electricity per year. Now, you all may know more about terawatts than I do, but I translate that into 5 times New Hampshire's annual electricity consumption, so significant savings. As Senator Murkowski pointed out, Energy efficiency enjoys diverse support among industry advocates because, you know, too much of our debate around energy has been fossil fuels versus alternatives. It's been about whether we benefit in the Northeast versus who benefits in the South or the West or Alaska. And everybody benefits from energy efficiency. It's one of the great places where we can really come to some common agreement. Senator Portman and I have done that over the last couple of years. We introduced legislation last year. As I pointed out, some of those provisions were signed into law as part of the act. Those provisions required the DOE to utilize advanced metering tools, the Department of Energy to study and better understand the barriers to the deployment of industrial energy efficiency. And we are reintroducing the legislation this year. It will include provisions around buildings that are voluntary, not mandatory, but critical because it will provide incentives, and as we all know, buildings use about 40% of our energy each year. It will assist the manufacturing sector, which consumes more energy than any other sector of the U.S. economy. And it will require the federal government, as you all pointed out, the single largest energy user, to adopt more efficient building standards, smart metering technology, and Congressman Gardner, I certainly agree we need to do more to make sure that people can take advantage of performance contracting. The bill will have a real measurable benefit to our economy and our environment. A study by the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy found that last year's version of the bill would have saved consumers $4 billion by 2020 and helped businesses add 80,000 jobs to the economy. It would also cut carbon dioxide emissions by the equivalent of taking 5 million cars off the road. And in the process, it would not have increased the deficit of this country at all. We passed in committee last session the Shaheen-Portman legislation with broad bipartisan support. We had more than 200 endorsements from a wide range of businesses, environmental groups, think tanks, trade associations, from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to the National Association of Manufacturers and the Natural Resources Defense Council, not usually a coalition that comes together around legislation. These are the kinds of non-traditional alliances that allowed us to make progress. I think we have the opportunity, working together both in a bipartisan way and a bicameral way, to build on the success of the last session and to do something significant around energy efficiency. And I thank this committee very much for the opportunity to be here and for the work that you are doing, and look forward to partnering with you. Thank you.
Well, Senator Shaheen, thanks very much. And once again, I want to thank both of you for coming over. We look forward to continuing a dialogue and working with members of the Senate and coming up with some solutions to these problems. And we look forward to working with you in the future. So thank you very much, and good luck in getting back over to the Senate side.
It's the hardest part of our job.
At this time, I'd like to call up the witness on the second panel. That's the Honorable Dr. Kathleen Hogan, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency, the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at the Department of Energy. So, Dr. Hogan, if you would please step forward. Do we have a name tag for her? Well, Dr. Hogan, welcome. Thanks so much for taking time to join us this morning. And before I introduce you, I just want to make one comment. You know, we have these hearings, and we really value the testimony that's provided to the committee. And we do have a rule that we try to follow, being able to receive the testimony 2 days prior to the hearing. And unfortunately, we received yours last night about 7 p.m., and I know that you've got a very busy schedule, but I hope that in the future, if you all testify up here, you might be able to get here a few days early on this testimony so we have an opportunity to really look at it. But thank you for being with us today. We do look forward to your testimony and your expertise, and I'll recognize you for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Rush, and members of the subcommittee for inviting me to testify today on behalf of the Department of Energy. I think, as noted by many that have spoken already, energy efficiency is a large untapped resource in the United States. It offers important benefits for the country, improved competitiveness, billions in consumer savings, growth in domestic jobs, greater reliability of our energy systems, and reduced reliance on foreign oil, as well as environmental benefits. This year's State of the Union address included a goal to cut energy wasted by our homes and businesses by half over the next 20 years and to double our energy productivity. The Department of Energy's energy efficiency portfolio is making important contributions toward these goals, including helping to ensure the long-term competitiveness of the United States, though much more needs to be done. We can start by looking at our homes and buildings. They do consume about 40% of U.S. energy at a cost of about $400 billion a year, and there are many savings opportunities. DOE R&D has advanced new technologies, lighting, heating and cooling systems, windows that offer significant savings. Our work with leading home builders offers new homes with 50% savings over typical homes, as well as good indoor air quality and durability. We're working with organizations, any number of them, on home upgrade programs to address the large number of existing homes, most built before modern codes, and these programs offer savings of 15 to 30%. And we've recently reached the major milestone of weatherizing more than 1 million low-income homes since 2009, helping these families save hundreds of dollars each year. We've also partnered with over 100 commercial and industrial and public sector organizations representing billions of building square feet and $2 billion in financing. They have taken the President's Better Buildings Challenge with a goal of saving 20% or more on their energy bills by 2020, and then showcasing for others how to do it. Our minimum energy conservation standards that we implement now span more than 60 categories of appliances and equipment and are currently saving consumers and businesses tens of billions of dollars each year. And as we've heard a lot of discussion this morning, as the nation's single largest user of energy, the federal government does continue to lead by example. We have reached large energy savings, water savings, and renewable energy goals, and are on target to meet the President's challenge to implement $2 billion in performance-based contracts by December 2013, investments, as we've heard, that will reduce our energy use at no cost to the taxpayer. Turning to manufacturing, we are working on next-generation technologies, processes, and materials that offer substantial improvements in efficiency and which will position the U.S. competitively for the future. In the State of the Union address, President Obama called for a network of manufacturing institutes that would help address cross-cutting challenges and help accelerate progress across the country. DOE is a partner in these efforts, for example, through a new pilot effort on additive manufacturing in Youngstown, Ohio. And we've recently announced a new energy innovation hub on critical materials at Ames Laboratory to develop solutions to domestic shortages of rare earth materials and other materials critical to U.S. energy security. We also have a strong track record with combined heat and power, which now has new market opportunities with lower cost natural gas, and we are supporting the President's goal of 40 new gigawatts by 2020. Finally, DOE manages a diverse transportation research portfolio that spans many technologies and addresses light-duty passenger cars to heavy-duty trucks. Building on past DOE research successes, the President has launched the EV Everywhere Grand Challenge to spur American innovation and to make electric vehicles more affordable and convenient to own and drive than today's gasoline-powered vehicles within the next 10 years. Electric vehicles do offer the potential for $1 a gallon gasoline equivalent, as well as a number of consumer conveniences, and the U.S. needs to continue to lead in this marketplace. So we are pleased to be part of meeting these challenges and contributing to a more secure, resilient, and competitive energy economy. We look forward to see what more we can do together with you. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, Dr. Hogan, thanks so much for your comments. We appreciate, as I said, your being here, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. I know you have a large portfolio of responsibilities, and certainly one of them does relate to the energy savings performance contracts. And would I be accurate in saying that part of your responsibility is working with other agencies of the federal government to encourage them to identify ways to be more efficient in their areas of responsibility? And do you know how many existing energy savings performance contracts are active at this time?
So you are accurate in saying that my portfolio includes the Federal Energy Management Program that does work with the other agencies to help them achieve a variety of energy, water, and renewable energy targets, and to help them with energy savings performance contracts. Currently, there are over 250, I think more like 270, 280 performance contracts in place worth that are driving investment of more than $2.5 billion in building improvements.
Right. And my understanding, the private companies that get these contracts, they provide the financing for this, and the government simply pays it back over time with a nominal interest charge. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're energy savings, yes. So there's a sort of a shared savings mechanism.
And generally, how long do these contracts, what is the repayment terms on the contract, the length of time?
They can vary based on what is necessary so that the performance contracting firm, that it works for them. It can be 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. We know recently I attended a luncheon, and there were a large number of company representatives there, and all of them were uniformly excited about this program and very optimistic and positive about it. And I left that luncheon excited myself because they were talking about all the great accomplishments they had made. And then, really, to my surprise, about 3 days later, a group of employees at a federal installation came into my office, and they were complaining about a contract that had been completed on their installation, and they were talking specifically about some sensor detectors that did not work right and some impact that it had on boilers, and it ended up costing a lot more money, and they had to bring people in on overtime to take care of these problems, and they ended up even disconnecting some of the systems. And we all know that you can always find something that didn't work correctly, but generally speaking, what sort of oversight do you have to ensure that at least those experiences are minimal?
So, I have the Federal Energy Management Program under my purview, and we do work with all the federal agencies around best practices to be following up with their energy service contracts. There are best practices for how to do evaluation, measurement, verification on what is being achieved with these contracts. And we are happy to work with any sort of issues that address and help those agencies work them through so that we are getting the bang for the buck that ESPCs have to offer.
So they can always come back to you all and say, hey, this is really not working the way it's supposed to be working.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I have no further questions at this time. Mr. Rush, I'll recognize you for 5 minutes of question.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary Hogan. It's certainly a pleasure to have you before the committee again here, and I'm proud of the many accomplishments that you have made and that your agency department has made. And I want to just focus on an area that centers on low-income households. it's been well established that low-income households pay a disproportionate amount of their paychecks on energy bill. And many urban constituents, those who live in my district, the first congressional district of Chicago, of Illinois rather, live in older homes and older buildings that are less energy efficient. And therefore they are more expensive in the summer to cool and in the winter to heat. And this leads to higher energy bills. And so my question to you is, of the many programs that President Obama has implemented, many of his proposals on energy efficiencies, I would like to know which ones do you think that are most important, that will have the most impact on urban and low-income communities. And so which one of the programs do you think that would help?
Well, certainly the weatherization assistance program has had a large impact in lowering the energy bills of low-income households. That's a several decade old program at this point that has weatherized 6 million or so homes over this period of time, 1 million or so since the Recovery Act was put into place, and it is helping these households at this point save billions of dollars. And we're doing a lot with that program to try and sort of expand its use so it can be more effective in multifamily housing and engage with the building owners of those buildings that sort of need different mechanisms with which to engage with the federal government. So that's just been a very powerful program that way.
In the public housing owned apartments, rental units, do you have any segmentation of the energy costs, and are they, especially in newer public housing developments, are they meeting energy standards, higher energy standards? Are you monitoring those, and what has been the effect of those rental units in public housing?
Yeah, so newer buildings certainly are meeting higher efficiency levels than the vast number of the older buildings that are out there. And we continue to work with HUD around standards for sort of federally owned buildings, and work to continue to engage with those building owners of tenant-occupied space.
I think that in order to have a more vibrant and effective energy policy and energy culture going into the future, it's important that we train, it's important that we introduce, it's important that we teach young people, even in the early grades of grammar school or grade school, the importance of energy. Do you see that as being a part of what you have done and what you plan to do in the future in terms of working with the school systems across the nation?
Yeah, we have done a number of educational initiatives with students in the schools around energy challenges and other means, so that we can educate people about sort of energy in the school, energy at home, and create such a culture. And happy to engage with you more on those topics.
Well, I would like to work with your office to
Gentlemen.
identify the different types of programs and incentives that exist for low-income constituents.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This time, I recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be real brief. The original mission of the Department of Energy was to decrease our reliance on imported crude oil. The mission statement, as I pulled up recently, has changed a little bit. There's reports today that we actually have imported more crude oil from Saudi Arabia over the last month than we have in the last previous years. So put me down as a skeptic about the benefits of parts of the Department of Energy. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put into the record a press release from the Consumer Electronics Association and National Cable and Telecommunications Association announced today these companies, Comcast, DirecTV, Dish, Time Warner Cable, Cox, Verizon, Charter, AT&T Cablevision, Bright House Networks, and CenturyLink, and manufacturers Cisco, Motorola, and EchoStar Technologies, and AESI. They've come to an agreement to obviously establish set-top boxes that are energy efficient, use the same technology as some of the electronics, you know, the sleeping modes and stuff. This is an example of the industry doing it without government assistance or help. I also believe in the consumers, and I'm also concerned that if we push environmental standards and rules and regs on the individual homeowners, that the folks in poor regions of this country can't afford the more expensive homes that require new technology versus homes that they want to purchase and live in. So with that, Mr. Chairman,
Without objection.
and I yield back time.
Gentleman yields back. This time, I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hogan, I want to ask you some questions about the National Energy Efficiency Standards for appliances and equipment. But before I turn to that, I want to briefly discuss a DOE rulemaking under Section 433 of the Energy Independence and Security Act. Section 433 requires new and substantially rebuilt federal buildings to meet strong efficiency performance standards to reduce the use of energy generated from fossil fuels. DOE issued a proposed rule in 2010, but it lacks sufficient detail for stakeholders to evaluate how the standards would operate in practice. Last summer, Senator Bingaman and I wrote to Secretary Chu requesting DOE to issue a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking to address issues raised by stakeholders and allow for additional public comment. Your response indicated willingness to issue such a proposal, but we've been waiting since last August. Dr. Hogan, is DOE committed to issuing a supplemental proposal for implementing Section 433, and if so, by when?
So I'm happy to be here to be able to relay that indeed we are committed to issuing a supplemental proposed rule. We actually do have that supplemental proposed rule at this point with the Office of Management Budget under review, which is part of our process before it can be shared with stakeholders. So if you rolled back the clock just a few weeks, if you looked at the OMB system, it would have shown that there was a final rule under for review, and now it will show that there is a proposed rule under review. I think also in the letter that we sent to you, we indicated that we did understand some of the issues that were being raised, both by federal agencies and stakeholders, and things that needed to be reconsidered, such as using renewable energy credits potentially to meet some of the requirements, how to define a retrofit or a renovation, as well as how to deal with CHP. And those are the types of issues that we will be addressing in this supplemental notice.
Will this proposal address the concerns stakeholders have raised regarding how to define major renovation, the potential use of energy credits for compliance, and clarifying the treatment of combined heat and power?
Yes.
Section 433 was intended to reduce carbon pollution by promoting energy efficiency and renewable energy in government buildings in a common sense and reasonable manner. For example, it directs the Secretary to consider whether there are significant opportunities for substantial improvements in energy efficiency in determining whether a renovation is major and subject to the standards. Dr. Hogan, will you commit to work closely with the stakeholders throughout the rulemaking process to ensure that the rule is practical, reasonable, and effective?
Absolutely, we'll make that commitment.
Thank you. Dr. Hogan, in your testimony, you referenced this tremendous effectiveness of energy efficiency standards for appliances and equipment. Could you please elaborate on that?
Sure. So appliance standards is a program that the Department of Energy implements. We implement them due to, under congressional authorization to do so. I think there is always an interesting conversation around these standards. One of the ways to look at it is we are typically given authority to implement these standards when there is sort of different states are taking different approaches, which creates a patchwork effect across the country that's very difficult for manufacturers to deal with. That is typically when they go to the Congress and ask for the department to have such authorities.
Dr. Hogan, as I understand, the department implements minimum energy conservation standards for more than 60 categories of appliances and equipment. As a result of these standards implemented since 1987, energy users are estimated to have saved tens of billions of dollars on their utility bills in 2010. Is that right?
That's right. These standards that create a minimum level for the products that can be sold in this country are saving tens of billions of dollars.
I understand there are at least 5 proposed or final efficiency standards that have been sitting at OMB for over a year, and I understand the DOE has missed the rulemaking deadlines for another 4 standards that have not yet gone to OMB. I assume this is correct. Am I right?
That is in the ballpark, yes.
Well, it makes no sense. These standards save money, strengthen our economy, and reduce pollution. I urge the administration to move forward and get them finalized. Thank you so much for your participation in the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman. I might just say that in the spirit of all the above energy policy, many of us would like to get rid of Section 433 because it certainly discriminates against an area of energy supply. This time I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, the Vice Chairman, Mr. Scalise, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you being with us, Ms. Hogan. And, as the Chairman referenced Section 433, and I think the ranking member of the full committee just was talking about that too in the rule making in the process. Can you tell me what kind of concerns y'all have heard about these supplemental rules being developed?
What we hear is stakeholders are looking for a fair amount of flexibility in the implementation of these standards. So some of the questions that have been raised are around the definition of a major renovation. So what actually sort of triggers these significant savings requirements, whether or not you can use renewable energy credits to meet some of these savings targets, and how it is that CHP would be counted. Those are the types of issues that we think we can address through a notice, a proposed rule, and effectively engage stakeholders in getting to resolution.
And it's something that concerns a lot of us, just that section in general, and I think we'll be looking at it some more. The federal government is the largest user of electricity and fuel in the country. So I'd like to know what steps you're taking to actually go throughout federal agencies and achieve real efficiencies and savings in the federal government.
So the federal government currently is subject to a number of savings targets, either through congressional action or through executive orders.
Which ones are actually saving taxpayers money? I'm not talking about objectives and goals down the road and years from now.
Right.
How are you saving the taxpayer? I mean, when we came in 2 years ago into the majority, we said we need to start controlling spending, because 40 cents of every dollar is borrowed money. And we started with ourselves. We actually cut our own budgets here in the House. We cut the budgets for congressional offices because we felt like you have to put your money where your mouth is. So, you know, as y'all are going around telling everybody else to change their lifestyles, what kind of things are you doing within the federal government to save taxpayers money in terms of energy?
Sure. So take energy. The energy intensity of the federal government has been reduced by approximately 15% over the last 10 years or more. Also on water savings, we are meeting significant savings targets there as well. Both of those lead to substantial dollar savings across the federal fleet.
I think a lot of us would say if you just, you know, turned out all the lights over at, you know, some of these agencies that are putting radical regulations in place that are costing us jobs and making families have to pay more for food and for electricity and for gasoline, you'd probably not only, you know, become more efficient, you'd help families and get this economy moving again. I'd just throw one suggestion out there as we're talking about efficiency. You know, President today and every day for the last couple of days as sequester's going around, he's been flying around on Air Force One all around the country trying to scare people about the effects, many of which are not even accurate on the sequester. I think you could probably be a lot more efficient. You might want to call the White House to tell them, just park Air Force One. I mapped it out. It's only less than 2 miles for the president just to drive right down here to the Capitol and sit down and let's work this thing out instead of flying all around the country tens of thousands of miles and using who knows how much fuel. You know, just park Air Force One and go the maybe 2 miles down here and, you know, just sit around a table and figure this thing out. But that might be a way to save a lot of energy. Not sure if y'all want to pass that on to the White House. Might be a good idea. With that, I'd yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Scalise. This time, I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, for
Thank
5
you, Mr.
minutes.
Chairman. And I appreciate your opinion on that, Mr. Scalise. And I thank you, Dr. Hogan, for coming and testifying today, and for your hard work in the department. I just have a question about rate of return. What do you have a sort of an average rate of return a household might experience by investing in energy efficiency technology? How many years would it take to pay back a $5,000 investment in new windows or something like that if it's just taken out of energy savings?
Yes, so every home can be a little bit different, but I think there's a fair number of improvements somebody in their home can make that can have a payback of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years.
Okay. So, and that's not including federal subsidies, or is that including?
That would be without any type of subsidies. That would just be based on doing, you know, insulation windows, a more efficient furnace, et cetera.
So the homes in lower income areas are going to be less efficient than the newer homes in the more affluent areas. So they would have a quicker rate of return perhaps than the newer homes. So federal help in that would be very effective in terms of reducing energy use and saving people money.
Yeah, I think people use incentives for any number of reasons. One is to help buy down the cost of these improvements, but also, as we know from utility programs around the country, you use some incentives just to even get people's attention, just to help get those improvements moving.
Thank you. I was very thrilled to hear you talk about water savings. You know, I'm from California, and we have water wars out there, and water savings is a double win because you're not only saving water, but you're saving energy because so much energy is needed to produce and deliver water. Are there significant programs in place to incentivize Western users, particularly in Southern California, to save water?
Yeah, we can look into that and get back. Certainly not at the federal level, but there's certainly the issues with water in California are being addressed by a number of the California agencies, and I know they are trying to put programs in place very similar to what the energy utilities have been doing for years.
Okay, one more area of questioning. Again, I was thrilled to hear you talk about electric vehicles, but I've heard some concern about companies installing equipment that might service all kinds of vehicles. Are you working with companies to address potential concerns of these businesses for installing stations that can accommodate all vehicles? What's the plan in terms of getting this out there in the business world?
Yeah, so we are trying to engage with organizations of all kinds around building out the right infrastructure around alternative vehicles. We have a Clean Cities program that works with cities around helping them plan for the right infrastructure and build it out based on sort of what makes sense in their regions, and want to be doing this as in an efficient and effective as way as possible.
So we're moving forward aggressively in that.
Yes.
And I think the new automobile efficiency standards are going to go a long ways in terms of getting us to use less fuel, and I applaud your efforts on that. Thank you. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Burgess, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you having the hearing. Appreciate the opportunity to hear from the Department of Energy. Let me just say, for the record, I am a big believer in energy efficiency. I do think that's the low-hanging fruit. I think that's the common ground where certainly we can meet on many of these issues. Every July, I do an energy efficiency summit in the district. Back home in Texas, we've had speakers as diversified as David Porter from the Texas Railroad Commission to James Woolsey, the former director of the CIA. I've tried to construct things in my life around energy efficiency, the home we live in, the hybrid car that I drive. So I am a believer in energy efficiency. I made those decisions based upon what was right for me and my family, not based on anything that the federal government told me to do. But since you're here, let me ask you a question. The number one question everyone in my district is asking, and why are gas prices so high right now? Gasoline prices.
I guess it's based on the cost of production and the cost of moving it through our systems.
Well, you're in the Department of Energy. Presumably you have these discussions, correct?
The Department of Energy does have discussions, and it does have discussions about what we can do in the short term and in the long term to address gas prices. I think in the short term, what we can do is really give people, the tips about how to use the gasoline that they're using as efficiently as possible. And then in the longer term, we can clearly be figuring out how to increase low-cost supply as well as use alternative fuel vehicles and further development in that space.
Well, it is of concern that here we are in February, and back home in Texas right before I came up here, I filled up the hybrid with gasoline that cost $3.70 a gallon in Texas in February. That means in New York, after Memorial Day, they will be closing in on $5 a gallon gasoline. So I think this is a matter of some importance, and since the Department of Energy is involved in this, and this may have a direct effect on our economy generally, no one can forget that just before the meltdown that occurred in 2008, our gasoline prices and diesel prices were sky high, and they certainly had an effect on the economy. So I would think this would be something that you would be discussing internally, and maybe even some interagency discussions. Do you ever pick up the phone and call the people at the Commodities Future Trading Commission?
We do engage in conversations across the federal government, and we, of course, are very concerned about these prices and are doing what we can do at this point, yes.
What does Mr. Gensler at CFTC tell you that he is doing that may dovetail with what you're doing with the energy efficiency in the Department of Energy?
We can give you a more detailed explanation, if you would like, on what the federal government is doing in this space.
I would appreciate that very much. And again, I think that would be of general interest to people who are maybe watching this on C-SPAN. Now, you, in answer to, or actually Mr. Waxman made a point about that he wanted to see things that were common sense directions and applied in a reasonable manner, and I think he was talking about the Federal Energy Management Program. So you have the jurisdiction of federal buildings under your control, the energy efficiency of federal buildings, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is this building under your control?
I believe this is under the Office of the Architect.
But I'll just say from my observation, having been in the congressional office buildings now for a few years, in 2007, 2008, someone came in and changed all my light bulbs to CFLs. Nobody told me they were going to do it. Nobody warned me not to break one over my head one night. But there I was. I had CFLs in all the offices. Well, that's great. We're perhaps saving some energy by doing that. But no one has ever done, as far as I can tell, an energy audit of the Rayburn building and discussed the effect of having single pane glass on all of the windows. I have an office that faces west in the summertime. It gets beastly hot. Is this something that your office might be interested in?
We're happy to have a conversation about how to do an audit of the Capitol buildings.
Well, I'm just shocked that the architect of the Capitol has not reached out to you. As part of your mission is for the energy efficiency of federal buildings, and this is a big federal building that consumes a lot of energy. You changed all the light bulbs, but maybe there were other things you should have been looking at as well.
Well, I think if we engage the Office of Architect, we'll see that they are doing a lot more around the Capitol buildings, and probably just started with, as what we were saying, the low-hanging fruit. And certainly doing those audits is a cornerstone of what we're doing across the entire federal family.
So can I assume that there are conversations between your office and the Office of the Architect of the Capitol as far as the energy efficiency of the energy consumption of federal buildings, at least on the House side?
We have been engaged with the Office of the Architect in their plans, yes.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Well, Chairman, if maybe you could share some of that information with our office as well. We would appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you, and I'll yield back.
This time I recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Hogan, welcome. And I have a couple of questions about combined heat and power and the President's 2012 Executive Order on Industrial Energy Efficiency. What role do you see for is the federal procurement going to play in achieving the President's goals of deploying more combined heat and power systems?
So certainly, as the largest energy user and as a big procurer of equipment, the federal government has a big role to play. And I think we are currently trying to put together a broader strategy on what that role could look like, though what we're doing in the immediate term is exploring extending a pilot program that we have underway in the ESPC space. We've been standing up a pilot program called Enable to allow the ESCOs to engage in the sort of the smaller buildings that are within the federal family that typically get overlooked, and we're looking to expand that Enable pilot to encourage combined heat and power, or allow investments in a performance contracting way.
Thank you. And as part of the effort to identify policy or regulatory barriers to investing in CHP, the executive order states that federal agencies will convene stakeholders to solicit their ideas and input. Is DOE involved in that list of agencies?
Yes, if I'm thinking about the same. So the executive order encouraged us to go out and engage any number of stakeholders around how to advance CHP. We are having a set of regional dialogues on this topic, the next one in a couple of weeks in Baltimore, around the things that we can do. And then we are also engaging in a report to Congress that was part of the energy bill passed this past December to do a much more detailed analysis around the barriers in the way of CHP and the things we can do to remove them.
I know that back in, I think it was 98, a roadmap was developed to take to double CHP from, was it 46 gigawatts to 92 in that neighborhood?
Yes.
And they somewhat met that goal, that
Yes.
Target deadline. Where do you believe the best opportunities exist today for deployment of CHP?
I think we're at a very interesting point right now for CHP in that there are many, many, many opportunities from large heat process type industries to smaller industries and into the residential and commercial sectors. I think you'll hear from another panel member today on this topic, but I think also as we look at sort of the post-Sandy period of time, there's a lot more interest in things that offer enhanced, energy security, as, linked to stave off the aftermath of these storms.
And in the midst of all of that, do you see a particular industrial sector that might be targeted for best retrofitting to CHP?
So the industrial sectors that make the greatest sense are ones that have some amount of heat load. So again, that can be pretty broad, but and a lot of it.
In the efforts in the State of the Union for the race to the top for energy efficiency, how is that going to be developed? I'm asking that from my perspective in the state of New York, which has been rather aggressive about doing energy efficiency. Do we get impacted for being a progressive state in regard to a baseline that might be well in advance of other states? How would we fare in that whole race to the top?
So we'll be happy to engage stakeholders in a conversation on how this program will be designed. At this point, the next point when there will be more information about this program will be in the rollout of the President's budget, and then after that we'll be happy to engage with you more directly.
Yeah, I would just indicate a concern there that if you've done great work, you ought to be rewarded for that and continue to do more, and the consumer should not be held back or impacted negatively impacted because of it. I'm just about out of time. I was going to go into weatherization, but then let me just make a pitch for weatherization activities. Even though the stimulus did a great deal of investment to the good, I believe there's a lot of unfinished business, and would strongly encourage that opportunity. Thank you very much.
This time I recognize the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here today. What is the biggest barrier to increased use of the energy savings performance contracts by the federal government? The barriers that are of concern.
I think one of the barriers is really just getting over the hurdle of having many different agencies go down this path. It takes a fair amount of knowledge to go and do that, and that's what the Federal Energy Management Program is set up to do. But just because we offer those services doesn't mean people necessarily want it. And again, it's just because everybody is doing so much, in their day-to-day jobs. And I think that's one of the then barriers that the President's Performance Contracting Challenge is really helping overcome, challenging the agencies to commit to $2 billion worth in energy savings performance contracting. Means each agency has their own goal, and each agency is working through a set of projects to meet those goals. So I think we will have largely addressed that particular barrier by December 2013.
All right. On weatherization, you may have read some stories from my district where there were several $1 million issued for weatherization in the city, and it was something like 14 or 15 homes that were actually provided the services, but yet the money's gone. And so weatherization, at least in our area, is not a program that's held in high esteem. It is an example of the waste and fraud. So could you point out the internal DOE structure to oversee the weatherization program and to ensure that 80% of it, the dollars that are provided, aren't being used for administrative purposes?
Sure. I mean, first, let me say that issues with weatherization really were the exception and not the rule. And there is a very comprehensive set of quality assurance procedures in place, on top of the fact that only a certain portion of the dollars can be used for administrative purposes.
And what percentage is that?
It's I think in all, I think it's about 20%.
20% is
In
allowed
all.
for administrative
In
purposes.
all.
Then the rest has to,
Be put to work to improve low-income family homes. So, yeah.
and so when, how would, there were several stories in our local paper outing this scam. Do those rise up in DOE? Do people catch those so you can begin an investigation? And how is an investigation into that type of waste and fraud, well, what triggers an investigation? Can you investigate that?
Absolutely, we can investigate that. And there have been any number of anytime we hear of an issue, it is investigated, and we do everything in our power to correct it and recoup any dollars that may have been misused.
Will you check for me and get back to me of what you've done on the Omaha situation with the waste and fraud in that program?
Would be happy to do that.
Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. At this time, recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Hogan, for being here. Energy efficiency is a key component for shifting our nation towards a clean energy economy. We've made great progress in changing the way we use and conserve energy, but we need to do much more. I believe one area where we can make a significant impact is by providing sound financing mechanisms to individuals eager to make energy efficiency upgrades to their home. In fact, last fall in my district of Sacramento, we launched a revamped public-private partnership born out of the Recovery Act funds to encourage residential energy upgrades. The demand for residential energy retrofits is strong. Property assessed clean energy or PACE programs are one approach to financing home retrofits. With PACE, homeowners can finance energy efficiency improvements without an upfront cost through a voluntary assessment on their property. Unfortunately, PACE programs have faced some major hurdles. Dr. Hogan, does DOE support innovative financing mechanisms that would help homeowners make these important upgrades?
Yeah, through our work at the Department of Energy, we are very supportive of innovative financing mechanisms and doing everything that we can to help pull out the lessons learned and share them with others, as well as working to help states and local governments continue to leverage some of and improve the effectiveness of the loan, of the revolving loan funds that they were able to stand up with Recovery Act dollars.
Okay, now, is there a way to get PACE programs back on track through administrative means? Are you or the White House still engaging FHFA to restore this program?
I think what we have all heard from FHA is FHA would like more data to better understand what how these loans perform. And so the Department of Energy is actively engaged in working with others to try and pull together the type of data that the finance industry needs to understand this loan performance.
So you are looking at probably similar approaches to facilitate this growing demand.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Dr. Hogan, some have suggested that we don't need government policies to boost energy efficiency. They say that if customers really wanted energy efficiency, the market would supply it. But my understanding is that there are a lot of market failures in this area. The classic example is the situation where the landlord has no incentive to weatherize an apartment because the tenant pays the utility bills. Dr. Hogan, could you please discuss some of the market failures that allow energy waste to persist even when it could be cost-effective to deploy efficiency measures? And are these market failures significant?
I think we can see from the opportunity that we all talk about over and over with energy efficiency that there are a list of market barriers that hinder people from making what might be sort of the economically rational choice. And that can just be that some of the more efficient products do cost a little bit more upfront, even if they do have a very attractive payback associated with them. And some of it is just, it's hard to get the information so that you know what that payback would look like. So those are the types of things around which policies can be very helpful in helping people get the savings that are there to be gotten.
Could you explain further on that, what the policies might be?
Better information, and clearly the reason we do appliance standards as well is because we can help consumers get the savings that are there from the more efficient products whenever there's sort of a cost-effective opportunity to do so.
Okay. I just also want to follow up on what my colleague from New York has talked about the race to the top for energy efficiency. You know, California has been involved in this a long time, since the 70s with the grandfather of energy efficiency, Art Rosenberg. And so we don't want to be, you know, in a sense, starting from baseline, which is artificial in a sense. So we would love to have that discussion with you. So that's, I have no further questions, so I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Cassidy, for 5 minutes.
I'm going to defer to my gentleman, my colleague from Texas, for a turn, please.
The gentleman from Texas, recognized.
I thank the chair. And good morning, Dr. Hogan. Welcome. I appreciate your time and expertise. One of the instances where energy is lost, as you know, regardless of the initial source, is in transmission. The wires we use are largely copper. They lose significant amounts of energy as they travel from place to place. Many people may not realize this because Texas is the #1 producer of oil and gas, but we are the #1 producer of wind in America. The problem with our wind is it's generated in the Panhandle in western Texas. We need it in eastern Texas, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin, in some cases 700 miles away. But the University of Houston is trying to change that. Having recently been named a Tier 1 research university and being led by an innovative and hands-on chancellor, Dr. Renu Couture, U of H has created an energy research park. One project that they're doing at the University of Houston Energy Research Park is working on a superconducting wires that are up to 20% more efficient than current wires. And this is not just an academic project. U of H intends to prove this works by rewiring their main campus with these superconducting wires. In true Texas tradition, they're going all in, putting their future, and more importantly, the future of over 300,000 students online. Are you aware of this project being developed at the University of Houston Energy Research Park?
I personally am not, but it certainly does sound very exciting.
Well, if not, since are not familiar with it, I'd like to offer you a chance to come down and see it. I mean, if you got some time, we go right here to Reagan National Airport, have a direct shot on United Airlines to Intercontinental Airport in Houston. Would love to take you down there and see the Energy Research Park.
We'd be very interested.
And earlier today, I had a meeting with people from ABS, which is the American Bureau of Shipping. And one energy efficiency they're looking at is natural gas. In fact, liquid natural gas for transports of maritime vehicles. In fact, NASCO, the shipbuilder, is actually building a first project where one of their big ships will be powered by LNG going to the Caribbean area and that part of the country. What do you think about that initiative for energy efficiency? Natural gas as opposed to traditional fossil fuels.
Certainly we can have a conversation about that as well.
Okay, well, one further question for you, ma'am. I mean, again, our biggest challenge right now, one thing we have in West Texas as well, getting to the Defense Department, they're being very innovative with their energy resources, their needs. Fort Bliss and El Paso, one of the largest bases, the largest geographic base in America, is actually doing great things with solar because they have the sun out there. In fact, they're hoping to be actually a net exporter sometime, getting energy off the base and helping the local community. I mean, that's one example of what the federal government can do. But again, my biggest concern, what I'm hearing from back home, is let the market decide what the technology is. Don't enforce some sort of technology from. So I ask your assistance going forward to listen to the market and help us, get this superconducting technology going on. All the things at the University of Houston, come on down and see it. I really appreciate it.
Terrific.
Thank you. Yield back the balance of my time.
This time, recognize the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Castor, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Secretary Hogan. Thank you for meeting with me a couple of months ago to advise on all the great things that are going on with energy efficiency. I think there's so much more to do all across the country for families and businesses. So I encourage you to keep at it, and we can unleash the powers of American ingenuity and really empower families and businesses and save money at the same time. I also wanted to thank you for your attention to the historic investment under weatherization. Under the Recovery Act, I think you said we were able to weatherize 1 million homes. And let me tell you what that means in my area, in the Tampa Bay area in Florida. That means that thousands of the folks that I represent are saving money on their energy bills. While at the same time, we created a lot of jobs. We created a lot of jobs at a time when the unemployment rate was really hurting families. And the legacy it's left is very important. Now our community colleges, with that investment, have ongoing weatherization training initiatives. They're still creating jobs, even though the investments from the Recovery Act have tapered off. For families that struggled to get by, if they're able to save a few $100s or $1,000 a year on their electric bill, that is very meaningful to them. That means they can do better at the grocery store, they can do better with other bills that come in. So thank you for your attention to that. Is all of the investments under the Recovery Act for weatherization, is that all invested now, or are states across the country still rolling out any of those monies?
The vast majority of the Recovery Act dollars for weatherization is now spent. So yes, it's.
And then
it's
what's the
largely
status of ongoing weatherization efforts?
That's a good question right now. Given the continuing resolution that we are now under, we are working hard to give the states the information they need to go into their next program years. It's a little bit complicated because of the continuing resolution, which continues the weatherization budget at a level well below where it had been historically.
There's
So
just such a huge payback for the federal dollars that we can invest back home in our local communities that save our constituents money, so that money comes back to them, then we create jobs. And we're still kind of stuck at this 7.9 unemployment rate, and it's just difficult to watch the Congress self-inflict a wound and set us back at a time when the economy is getting better, and I see great improvements and people are hiring. So that's our responsibility here, and I encourage my colleagues to think about that as these indiscriminate across-the-board cuts. This is an area that we should continue to invest in because it's paid such great dividends across the country. And for my colleagues that worry about gas prices, I have to say we are fortunate to be living through a time where we have made such progress in fuel economy for our vehicles. You know, I have a member of the family that bought one, or is leasing one of those electric vehicles. Since October, he has not visited a gas station. He has not purchased gas. I know my friends from Louisiana and the gas-producing areas, they probably don't like that. But you know how much money that is saving and how much that's saving families all across the country. This is remarkable progress. It's saving consumers money. If you can buy a fuel-efficient vehicle on average, that means $1,700 back in the pocket of consumers, where they can spend it on their families or their small businesses. It helps with climate change because the carbon dioxide from burning gasoline and diesel contributes to global warming and changes in the climate. It is reducing our oil dependence cost. Our dependence on oil makes us vulnerable to oil market manipulation and price shocks. And it increases energy sustainability. Oil is a non-renewable resource, and we cannot sustain our current rate of use indefinitely. So using it wisely and conserving is frankly just smart. Looking ahead, what are the challenges you see with fuel economy and lengthening the life of the batteries of these vehicles, and what are you optimistic about?
I think we're very optimistic about what we can do across a whole set of vehicle technologies. Certainly I already spoke to the new research effort around electric vehicles and what we can do there to make them much more cost competitive over the next 10 years, as well as convenient from the standpoint of the consumer, and then of course make available something along the lines of $1 per gallon gasoline in the electric, through electricity. I think we're also interested in what we can do with advanced combustion. We're doing a lot more there as well, and we think we'll be very well positioned to be working with U.S. auto manufacturers to meet the CAFE standards as they continue to ramp up in the coming years.
Gentlelady's time's expired. This time recognize the gentleman from Louisiana. Mr. McKinley from West Virginia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your patience, Dr. Hogan. Let's just start by saying I'm very supportive of all the initiatives on energy efficiency, and as just one of 2 engineers in Congress, it's a delight to be able to try to work and improve that a little further. But I've got 2 questions for you. The GAO came out 2 years ago with a report that said there are 11 agencies handling green buildings. There are 11 agencies offering 94 separate initiatives, and they said that by their own report, they're saying that that we could benefit with more collaboration. Could you share with us just briefly what you've accomplished over the last 2 years, and either confining them, because with budget constraints now, wouldn't it make more sense instead of having 11 agencies handling green buildings to just a handful or fewer? Have you accomplished any of that?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of coordination across the federal agencies.
Different than what you were prior to 2 years ago?
We are. I think we're getting more and more efficient, as we go forward. I would also say, just going back to that GAO study, when you just count things, it makes it look like there may be more duplication overlap than there may actually be, because certainly I oversee the Federal Energy Management Program. It's got an important role in engaging with each of the agencies around with their senior sustainability officials around their work.
Could you get back to me, please, with some of the initiatives, what you've done to help consolidate so that we can use the money instead of doing administratively? Wouldn't it make more sense if we could pass that on to the consumer in some fashion by reducing those costs at the federal government level? The second issue I have is a bit of a paradox. As someone that, my former firm, we designed a lot of schools, a lot of federal public buildings, and we knew that often what the cost was for operation of an older building, because they didn't meet all the new standards, the air quality, indoor air quality standards, there was a cost that you can assume in the operation. But now under the new standards, new buildings are typically winding for operational costs, are increasing in cost, primarily because of ASHRAE and others, the standards that are set for fresh air to come into a classroom, where you have to have 4 to 12 air changes per minute or per hour, as compared to where it had been before, where we had maybe sometimes where you had an individual unit, they would close the damper and there was no fresh air coming into Johnny's classroom. So now we're introducing that. So we have a paradox. We're trying to improve our air quality and our efficiency, but we're increasing costs to the consumer. How are you dealing with that?
We certainly understand that issue, and we are working to make sure that we are looking holistically at the costs for these buildings. Certainly we want to be promoting technology that meets our national objectives, but in a way that also keeps the costs in a good space for the people that have to pay those bills and really offer the savings that are there to be gotten. So we are looking at the O&M costs.
You do recognize then that the new standards, and I subscribe to them. I'm in agreement with them because they're improving our indoor air quality, but they are raising the cost of operation.
When you need mechanical ventilation, there is a cost there, but I think when you look across everything that's going on in these buildings, you see that that can be done in a very low-cost way, so that so you are delivering a much more lower-cost building for people to be living in.
Do you see, with these standards, do you accept, I guess I'm building back off that same premise because I'm glad we're providing fresher air into that, but do you acknowledge that perhaps the old buildings and some of these buildings, the indoor air quality wasn't as good as it is today by what we're doing, by bringing in fresh air?
I think that's a complicated question that requires a longer conversation.
Stop by. I'm over in Cannon, and let's see if we can't follow up with that, because I think we have a dilemma here in Congress often about indoor air quality versus outdoor air quality, and I'd like to make sure we have a good discussion about that, so that when those asthma attacks that people refer to often perhaps are being caused by our indoor air quality and the fact that we're not adhering to the various codes and standards that have been set forth. So if you could please I'd like to do that very much. Thank you very much. I yield back my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Griffith, do you have any questions? Mr. Gardner, Dr. Cassidy. Dr. Cassidy is recognized for 5 minutes.
Sorry, I'm not on the microphone. I apologize. Young families want the most square footage they can get in the place with the best school district. For them to invest in energy-saving things, which have only a payoff over 10 years, really defeats that purpose. And so the way that, they're trying to scrape money together, how can I get that best square footage in the best school district? If I invest $3,000 in something which the payoff is only over 10 years, that is that many fewer square feet I can purchase. Does that make sense? You look quizzical, so I'm not sure I'm being clear.
No, I understand what you were saying.
Yeah, so really if we talk about market mechanisms, it seems like much of what we discuss almost is by fiat, almost by definition, because really under the current way we finance mortgages, that family, again, has to make that trade-off, less square footage or not as good school district in order to have some of these things which we all agree would be wise for energy efficiency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the way we've been looking at some of these home purchases is through like the total cost of ownership. So if you look at the cost of a mortgage plus the cost of the energy bill.
Now that though right now, as we've investigated this, that is not, the cost of the energy bill is not currently used by mortgage underwriters in terms of determining someone's ability to get a mortgage. So when you look at it, is that really impacting that young family with 3 kids trying to get the better home sort of thing?
Yeah, so there is an issue as to where that young family is and how large a mortgage they can get and whether they're sort of at that maximum level of a mortgage. But I think what we have seen in recent years is that hasn't been sort of the biggest barrier.
Now I'll tell you, when I just came to mind last year because Senator Isaacson and Bennett put forward their SAVE Act. We have been thinking the same concept. But when I spoke to bankers, they really do not include the energy cost in a mortgage or somebody's suitability. Frankly, we can't talk about market mechanisms until we address this if we're thinking of that young family. Would you concede that? And if so, how do we proceed?
Well, I mean, I think we can proceed in a number of ways. One is let's continue to have the conversation on sort of the role of energy bills, because certainly a lower energy bill does give a household more money to spend.
But again, if the payoff is 10 years for that energy-saving intervention, really that family doesn't look at that 10-year savings. Does that make sense?
You mean because it's
they're on a cash flow basis.
Yeah.
It's not as if they got a lot of money in the bank that they can invest and see the payoff over 10 years. They are just now meeting their bills.
Sure.
And anything that pays off over 10 years is probably not uppermost in their mind.
Sure, but there's the standpoint from the family, there's the standpoint from the banker, right? But from the standpoint of the family, if you have a more efficient home and you had to pay a little bit extra and it's rolled into your mortgage as
Yes,
an
but
example.
that doesn't occur right now.
But it can. Those mortgages are available. Energy efficient mortgages are available. Part of it is sort of an access and awareness issue as opposed to.
I would love to see that, because when I spoke to the bankers, we had some people come in because we were pursuing this, and the banker said, listen, we have proprietary mechanisms by which we determine if somebody is eligible. It's proprietary to our bank, not industry-wide, and we do not include this, and we're not quite sure how.
Okay.
So if you have those, we'd love it if you could see that. Do you have awareness of Isaacson and Bennett's SAVE Act?
I do.
What are your thoughts about that?
I think in general, we are very supportive of the goals of the proposals that can help motivate home improvements.
So then let me switch subjects. When I speak to home builders, they look at the regulations put out by DOE, and they feel that sometimes something that is prescribed for one place wouldn't apply in another. And little things, for example, in my state, Louisiana, if you plant an oak tree on the west or south side, frankly, you'll get a heck of a lot of benefit. But there is no kind of calculation in terms of that, in terms of the overall cost efficiency of a home. Their suggestion was that you bring in stakeholders coming up with metrics so that someone could pick and choose, saying, listen, insulation really works well here, it's worth bang for the buck. And this other intervention cost me a heck of a lot of money, but I'm really not going to get a payoff for 20 years. Probably I will have sold the home by then. Any possibility of that sort of thing?
I think there's a robust conversation ongoing through the codes organizations on how to have the right you're talking about a more performance-based path.
Yes.
To get to an outcome in the least cost way. I think people are always interested.
So they feel as if your DOE regulations, though, are not outcomes-based, but rather they're sort of, you put in this amount of foam and this amount of this, and their criticism, and I've learned to say what I've been told, not what I know. So Dr. Hogan, you may say, oh my gosh, you're totally wrong on this. But their criticism is that your standards are less performance-based and more you shall put in 6 inches of foam sort of thing.
And both pathways are there. There are performance-based provisions in the codes. I wouldn't quite call them our codes. These are codes that are created by model code authorities, and the Department of Energy's role has been to do an energy savings determination relative to those codes to show that they do offer meaningful savings over the prior code. So they are a stakeholder-driven process that the Department of Energy will also bring technical information to the table for consideration, which is why there is an ongoing venue through which we can have all of these conversations.
Thank you, and I yield
Gentleman's
back.
time has expired. At this time, I'm going to recognize a gentleman from New Hampshire who's a valuable member of the Energy and Commerce Committee. He doesn't happen to serve on the Energy and Power Subcommittee, and so he's waited patiently till the end, and now he's recognized for 5 minutes for questions.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much, Mr. Ranking Member. By the way, having this hearing on efficiency this early in our congressional term is tremendous. So I want to thank you, and I think all of us do. In listening to this and talking to my colleagues, a couple of things. Number one, there does seem to be strong bipartisan cooperation and leadership on efficiency. And then second, there's really three questions that this committee's got to sort through, I think. Number one, what can the government do on its own? And Congressman Gardner and I are really focused on these energy saving performance contracts, and I want to come back to this.
But that's completely within the ability of government on its own to do useful things to save the taxpayer money and also make a contribution in cleaning up our environment. Second, there's a question of what can private citizens and companies do on their own. And I know Congressman Burgess has been very much on his own personal situation, very much focused on energy efficiency, and has some skepticism about steps that government takes that are either unnecessary or get in the way. Those are fair questions, and I hope our committee will ask those so that what it ends up that we do is helpful and doesn't get in the way of what private sector folks can do on their own. But then third, there are areas where it's possible for the private sector and the public sector to cooperate and then leverage the partnership to be successful. And Congressman McKinley and I are working on efforts to try to provide incentives to homeowners to be able to do things that otherwise they would not be able to do. So this is really just a plea to some extent to our committee that even though there'll be a lot of legitimate questions raised on a practical level about what's the government role, what's the private role, what's the partnership role, I hope we'll sort through those questions to have as the outcome, Mr. Chairman, productive steps that will allow the taxpayer and the company and the individual to save money. And this initial hearing is really helping us on our way. I do want to talk to you about the energy-saving performance contracts that I mentioned Mr. Gardner and I are really quite focused on. The President had a goal of $2 billion. I mean, what's better than being able to get a company to sign up and be paid essentially by sharing in the savings? How is that coming along? And is it possible, if this is successful, that reports I hear that there could be up to $20 billion in savings, that we could expand this effort?
Yes, so this was announced a little over a year ago, $2 billion, and then each agency took on a goal that adds up to that $2 billion, and the agencies are moving forward to put those projects in place. And sitting here today, we are on track to meet that $2 billion savings goal by December 2013, which indeed is very exciting. And I think that will allow the agencies to step back and work with the White House to hopefully come up with a phase 2 to this effort, but it's probably a little premature to say what that would look like.
And how about the utility performance contracts, the private sector efforts by our utility companies?
So this challenge by the President included both ESCOs as well as the utility energy savings contracts, and those are in this mix as well.
Okay. Dr. Cassidy has left, but I was listening very carefully to his concern about performance-based approach. Vermont does have, I think we're the only state that has an energy savings utility, and it is because there's been a sense in Vermont that the cheapest electricity and the cheap is the unit of electricity that we don't utilize. But the performance-based approach does seem to make an awful lot of sense to the Vermont Electric Efficiency Utility. How about to you?
So I think performance-based approaches really do make sense for all the reasons that people were raising earlier. You're not trying to pick a technology, you're trying to get to an outcome. So I think conceptually it really does make sense. I think the flip side of it is when builders are building a home, a lot of them say, we just want to know what to do in this region that's going to meet that performance-based approach. They don't want to be doing detailed
So you'd be glad to work with the committee or folks like Dr. Cassidy to focus on that performance-based outcome?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Peter, I knew you were from Vermont. I'm sorry, I said New Hampshire.
Well, that's okay, but
we're glad you're here.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks.
Well, that concludes the testimony of Mrs. Hogan and questions for her. So, Dr. Hogan, thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to working with you as we continue forward. And at this time, I'd like to call up the third and final panel. On the third panel, we have Mr. Kevin Casasco, who's Vice President Service, North America ABB, and he's testifying on behalf of the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, and the Industry Energy Efficiency Coalition. We have Ms. Britta McIntosh, who's Vice President, Business Development, Noresco, who's testifying on behalf of the Federal Performance Contracting Coalition. We have Mr. James Krause, Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing, Capstone Turbine Corporation, who's testifying on behalf of the U.S. Combined Heat and Power Association. We have Ms. Ellen Burt, Senior VP and Chief Customer Officer, Pacific Gas and Electric Company. We have Mr. Neil Elliott, Associate Director for Research, American Council for Energy Efficient Economy. And we have Mr. Ted Gayer, Co-Director, Economic Studies, and Joseph Peckman, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution. So I'd like to welcome all of the members of this panel. Thank you for your patience, and thanks for agreeing to join us today to give us your views, thoughts, and expertise on this important subject. As you know, each one of you will be given 5 minutes for your opening statement, and I would remind you to just be sure that your microphone is on. And you'll notice a couple of boxes on the table in which, when it's green, it means talk. When it's red, it means stop, but we frequently go over, so. But anyway, welcome, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Kosciuszko. We'll begin with you, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Rush, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for allowing me to testify on the successes and opportunities for energy efficiency in the industrial sector. I am Kevin Kosciuszko, Vice President of Services for ABB in North America. I oversee services for asset management, process safety, and industrial energy efficiency, as well as maintenance operations for ABB in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. By way of background, ABB is a Fortune 500 producer of power and automation products and services. We employ more than 140,000 people worldwide in over 100 countries, providing energy-efficient solutions for our industrial, utility, and government customers. I'm honored to be here representing the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, NEMA, and the Industrial Energy Efficiency Coalition, IEEC. NEMA is a trade association of electrical equipment and medical imaging manufacturers. Its member companies produce everything from power transmission and distribution equipment to lighting systems, factory automation and controls, and medical diagnostic imaging systems. The IEEC is a coalition of 6 of the largest global industrial automation and control system companies. Those companies are Eaton Corporation, GE, Rockwell Automation, Schneider Electric, and Siemens, in addition to ABB. We are technology providers that industry uses to make their processes more efficient, reduce costs, and increase competitiveness. ABB and the IEEC believe that energy efficiency is the cheapest, cleanest alternative fuel. It drives competition and industrial success. And the good news is that there are proven, available technologies that are already having an impact. My written statement offers examples of energy efficiency successes and case studies from each member of the IEEC. Yet together, our examples barely touch the breadth of current deployments and future possibilities. A recent survey of manufacturing executives demonstrates their understanding of the importance of energy efficiency and the impediments to its use. Executives report basing their energy efficiency investment decisions on cost-benefit analyses and the price of energy, far more than other considerations. Regulatory compliance was a distant third. Yet fewer than 40% of those surveyed had invested in efficiency in the past 3 years. In the U.S., the situation is even starker, with only 21% having invested in equipment to improve energy use in the last 3 years. The majority of those were in highly energy-intensive manufacturing industries, such as mining, metals, chemical production, and petroleum refining. This gap between awareness and action was attributed to 3 key factors. Nearly half of the respondents cited the lack of clear business case as a reason for inaction. 28% identified inadequate funding or financing as a critical barrier, and a lack of adequate information on efficiency options was reported as the 3rd greatest obstacle by 27% of those executives surveyed. These responses point to the need for further education, benchmarking, and identification of available technologies and their application, and to the importance of access to funding or financing to enable investments. Encouraging the efficiency enhancements needed to ensure our competitiveness will require both industries and government's involvement. We must supply the missing information and provide the necessary funding. At ABB and the IEEC, we are striving to do just that. We work continually to educate manufacturers on available technologies and industrial best practices. We train engineers, assessors, and finance teams to provide accurate, reliable energy audits and estimates on return on investment. We provide directly or assist in securing necessary financing. And we invest in ongoing research and development to continue innovation. In the areas of industrial energy efficiency, government has historically focused on reducing consumption in energy-intensive industries. While these industries represent a major portion of potential energy savings, the public sector has the ability to expand the visibility of conservation opportunities to industrial players, both large and small. Hearings like this, well-informed Department of Energy and Environmental Protection Agency activities, and federal support for research, audit, and deployment programs all raise awareness of the availability and value of energy-saving technologies. This is particularly true for the small and mid-sized companies with less knowledge of or expertise in newer efficiency tools. Tax policies and other incentives can encourage investment. Advanced systems that deploy networks of sensors, controls, and automation to achieve significant energy savings can benefit from incentives to provide a faster rate of return. Government is unique in its ability to support basic science and energy research, and the federal and state governments have the principal role in setting the grid investment policies and utility rate structures that enable deployment of critical line loss reduction, power quality management, and grid reliability technologies like volt-VAR optimization. There is no doubt of the ability of the U.S. industry to compete and succeed. America's competitive edge is the high level of productivity of our workers and the technologies and processes we deploy to secure greater output from fewer resources, including energy. At ABB, at NEMA, and at the IEEC, we work daily to support that effort. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify. I would ask that a copy of our latest energy efficiency white paper be included in the record, and I am happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you. It will be included in the record. Ms. McIntosh, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Whitfield and members of the subcommittee.
Is your microphone on?
Can you hear me now? I'm Britta McIntosh, Vice President of Business Development for Noresco, one of the largest energy services companies in the United States. Noresco is part of UTC Climate Controls and Security Systems, a unit of United Technologies Corporation, a leading provider to the aerospace and building systems industry worldwide. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today on behalf of the Federal Performance Contracting Coalition. The FPCC is a coalition of energy services companies that, like Noresco, implement projects that reduce federal spending on energy and maintenance using private sector funding. Our work is conducted using energy savings performance contracts, or ESPCs.
Would you please speak into the mic?
Our work is conducted using energy savings performance contracts, or ESPCs. Since the 1990s, ESPC projects have reduced waste in federal utility bills. Across the industry, more than 570 comprehensive energy projects have been implemented by 25 federal agencies, creating $13 billion in guaranteed energy cost savings and eliminating over 32 trillion BTUs of annual energy demand. By using performance-based contracting to upgrade facility infrastructure, we deliver energy and maintenance savings to government and private sector entities. Performance-based contracting means our company's compensation is tied to the realization of savings for the projects we install. In other words, if we don't perform, we don't get paid. At Noresco, our projects have delivered more than $3 billion in facility improvements at more than 2,000 sites. An ESPC redirects inefficient spending on energy into needed infrastructure improvements that conserve energy and dollars. Under an ESPC, energy services companies engineer and install upgrades for outdated and inefficient equipment, financed by the energy services company and at no upfront cost to the government. An agency will repay the government over time, the company over time, with funds saved on utility costs. The projected energy savings are guaranteed upfront by the company and are measured and verified during the contract period. At no time does the government pay more than it would have paid for utilities had it not entered into an ESPC. In 2010, for example, NORESCO, working together with the architect of the Capitol, modernized the heating, cooling, water, temperature control, and lighting systems here in the Rayburn building, and then also in the other House office buildings. This project has cut Congress's energy and water bills by more than $3.2 million annually. The federal government is the nation's largest energy consumer, costing taxpayers over $7 billion annually. An aggressive government-wide effort to eliminate energy waste in buildings could easily cut that number by 20% or more. Despite the opportunity to better steward the taxpayers' investments in public facilities, several difficult obstacles stand in the way. I'd like to talk about 3 of those. First, there's a lack of compliance with existing congressional mandates. In 2010, Congress directed agencies to audit their facilities to identify energy and water projects that would pay for themselves within 10 years or less. Currently, it's not clear where agencies stand on this audit process because those comprehensive reports requested by Congress have not yet been delivered. Even less clear is where agencies stand on implementing the energy savings measures these audits have also identified. This information is critical to understanding how much taxpayer money is being wasted through inaction and inattention. Second, there's a lack of an apples-to-apples comparison between the use of appropriations and private sector investment to provide agencies and Congress with the information needed to make good decisions. Oak Ridge National Laboratory has outlined in multiple studies that facilities which use appropriated funds to replace outdated equipment fail to properly budget for the ongoing maintenance of the new equipment. ESPCs require the provision of ongoing maintenance and savings verification to ensure that long-term persistence of savings and proper operation of the equipment is achieved. In 2007, Congress also directed agencies to implement a uniform approach to maintenance and savings verification to ensure that the government realizes the promised savings from any efficiency upgrades, although most agencies appear to have ignored this direction for appropriated projects. We recommend that you ask agencies how and when this simple requirement will be implemented for all efficiency projects, regardless of how they are funded. Third, the current approval process for ESPC contracts is excessive, with multiple redundant layers of review in many agencies. Officials with limited knowledge of the facility, project, or recommended technologies are often required to review and sign off on projects before they can proceed. Congress should push agencies to streamline their review process, allowing more projects to begin generating savings more quickly. In order to confirm that we are making true progress toward meeting our nation's energy and efficiency goals, Congress needs complete information about available energy savings opportunities at our agency's facilities, each agency's plans for implementation, and full transparency and accountability on all spending related to efficiency projects. We recommend that you take appropriate steps to ensure that prior congressional direction on these items is acted upon. Thank you again for your time and attention. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. McIntosh. Mr. Kraus, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Can you hear me? Great. Thank you. Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Rush, and distinguished members of the committee, my name is Jim Kraus, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Capstone Turbine Corporation. Capstone is the world's leading producer of low-emission microturbine systems. A microturbine is a small, fuel-flexible, typically sized 1 megawatt and below, and can be best described as a jet engine in a filing cabinet-sized box. Other forms of combined heat and power, or CHP, we are able to provide either base load or backup power at efficiencies exponentially greater than the grid. I am delighted to be here today to testify on behalf of the U.S. Combined Heat and Power Association. USCHPA is a nonprofit trade association formed in 1999 to promote deployment of CHP systems in the United States through education and advocacy. I'm going to speak today about the opportunity for natural gas-fired CHP and the barriers to greater deployment of CHP that policymakers can address. Currently, there are 82 gigawatts, or about 7% of all U.S. generating capacity produced by CHP systems. The technical potential for additional CHP from existing sites in the U.S. is approximately 130 gigawatts, or 12% of the U.S. generation capacity. This is readily available capacity, provided policies are established to support further CHP deployment. Access to low-cost U.S. natural gas resources makes supporting CHP a no-brainer, and is an easy route to lower emissions across the United States. Microturbines and other CHP systems are used by customers throughout the world in a variety of applications. Just to name a few examples, they can be used in onshore and offshore oil and gas sites like the Dominion Transmission sites in Mr. McKinley's district, offshore platform in Mr. Scalise's district, military applications like the one at MacDill Air Force Base, offices, like our government office project in Mr. Olson's district, multi-unit residential buildings, hospitals, like the VA hospital in Mr. Dingell's district, schools and universities, like Kate School in Ms. Cap's district, factories like American River Packaging in Ms. Matsui's district, hotels and other commercial sites like Proctor's Theater in Mr. Tonko's district, and wastewater treatment plants like the plants in Mr. Griffith's district and Ms. McMorris Rogers district. As referenced in my prepared remarks, CHP generally and Capstone specifically offers customers reliable off-grid power that, as we witnessed during Superstorm Sandy, provides critical power and thermal energy to hospitals, nursing homes, shelters, and data centers. Despite these opportunities, our company in the CHP industry to continue to encounter numerous regulatory and economic barriers that prevent greater deployment. There are pragmatic, cost-effective solutions that policymakers can champion to mitigate these issues. To begin, we would like to see greater top-level leadership from the government. While the recent executive order calling for 40 gigawatts of new CHP is helpful, we would be better served if the government were to lead by example through increased procurement of CHP to meet federal energy efficiency goals. Additionally, as the EPA implements Boiler Act, CHP should be strongly encouraged as a compliance strategy for those currently burning coal or oil. As part of this process, facility managers faced with compliance can seek site-specific technical and cost information from the DOE's Clean Energy Assistance Centers. Similar, we hope states will look to EPA's guidance on output-based emission regulations, which, unlike input-based standards, recognize both efficiency and pollution prevention benefits of CHP. Output-based standards encourage cost-effective long-term pollution prevention through efficiency. Likewise, we were glad to hear FERC propose reforms to small generator interconnections. Interconnection continues to be a barrier, but we continue to work with our friends in the utility industry to demonstrate the benefits that CHP provides for the grid and for consumers as clean, reliable distributed resource. In addition, both states and utilities should include CHP in their energy planning policies. The CHP industry is eager to be an active stakeholder in support of fair interconnect standards and CHP rates. Finally, we know that there are several technologies that currently benefit from government support through various levels investment tax credit. We believe the lack of parity in support levels for decentralized and renewable energy technologies blur the marketplace. We support parity in the treatment of various types of clean energy sources and would encourage a focus on performance-based measures to best spur market competition. To wrap up, let me highlight again the opportunity that exists today to generate clean, reliable power through CHP systems at existing industrial and commercial sites across the United States using U.S. natural gas. We appreciate your help in overcoming these barriers that exist to greater deployment of our innovative U.S.-made technology. Thank you for your opportunity to testify at today's hearing, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Krause. Ms. Burt, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Rush. Let me begin by thanking you and members of the committee for this opportunity to testify today. I'm Helen Burt, Chief Customer Officer for Pacific Gas and Electric Company. PG&E is one of America's largest combined gas and electric utilities. We serve about 15 million people in Northern and Central California. And over the last 30-plus years, together with the state of California, we've helped customers achieve extraordinary benefits when it comes to energy productivity. For us, these efforts are about being smarter when it comes to using energy. They're not about making do with less. They're about doing more with the energy we consume, helping customers get the most value of their energy dollars. Working as partners, utilities and our state policymakers have been able to support and encourage innovation and adoption of new technologies, and we've developed the most successful customer energy efficiency programs in the country. Sometimes we're working with the end-use customers like homeowners or small business owners. Other times we're moving further up the value chain, working directly with manufacturers, distributors, retailers, and contractors. The point is we take a comprehensive approach, and the results reflect that. If you look just at PG&E since our programs began some 30-odd years ago, the customer savings have been more than $20 billion. We've also avoided the need to build more than 25 power plants, saving all our customers money and providing tremendous environmental benefits. What's remarkable is that the potential gains look even greater today, thanks to the growing intersection between IT and energy. Technologies like smart meters are creating huge new opportunities. By enabling two-way communications on the grid, they're opening the door for wider adoption of advanced technologies like electric vehicles, smart thermostats, and other energy management tools. But most significantly, they're giving people more control over their energy bills. PG&E customers can now get near real-time information on their energy usage. Last year, we were able to create an online tool called the Green Button, which allows them to download that data. They can then use various apps to help them understand it and come up with options to achieve savings. As significant as the potential is to achieve further gains, we need the right policies. These include constructive tax policies, support for research, development, and deployment, supportive regulatory and rate structures, codes and standards, and programs that empower consumers and help companies share best practices. As you and others in Congress consider ways to help drive further progress, I'd like to highlight several areas where our experience shows you can have the greatest impact. One is encouraging regulatory approaches that incent utilities to pursue efficiency. Many utilities still face strong disincentives. Changing this one key to success. At PG&E, we now treat energy efficiency projects as a resource, just like we do new traditional generation facilities. Another area is improving regulatory consistency. Programs work best when everyone can operate from a consistent set of policies that they can count on for longer periods of time. That way, they can make multi-year commitments to support commercialization and deployment efforts. We also recommend encouraging consistent and clear methods for measuring and verifying the results of energy efficiency projects. A third area is encouraging public-private cooperation between utilities and government. And for example, PG&E manages energy efficiency turnkey projects for federal customers through our Utility Energy Services Contracts program. One effort now underway at the NASA Ames Research Center is expected to save more than $1.5 million annually in water and energy costs. Nationally, UESC projects are saving taxpayers roughly $400 million a year, and we should continue to encourage these efforts. And finally, a fourth area is building codes and appliance standards. These provide a foundation for other energy efficiency efforts and drive new technologies, programs, and practices. Our hope is to work collaboratively with many members of this committee who are already exchanging good policy ideas around energy productivity. New ideas and approaches will evolve just as quickly as the technology around us. As PG&E and California have demonstrated, energy efficiency can save money, spur innovation, provide consumers with more choices, and make our economy more productive and benefit the environment. And thank you again for this opportunity. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Rush, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today. My name is Neil Elliott. I'm the Associate Director for Research at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, frequently called ACEEE. We're a private, nonprofit, non-member research institute based here in Washington, D.C. As Ranking Member Rush said in his opening remarks, ACEEE has looked at the impact of energy efficiency on the U.S. economy and found it to be a significant contributor to economic growth over the last 40 years. In particular, I would note that, as has been noted by many of the witnesses so far today, energy efficiency represents the least cost energy resource in the U.S. economy. And a recent analysis suggests that in 2010, it contributed about half as much as all of the conventional resources to the U.S. economy. I mentioned in my written testimony 5 areas that we think the committee should consider for action in the coming Congress, and wanted to focus 3 of those in my oral remarks. The first, which has come up several times, is appliance standards. And I wanted to mention that since 1987, with the passage of the EPCA, Energy Policy Conservation Act, energy standards have saved 3.4 quads of energy, and that the standards that are in place today are projected to save $1.1 trillion through 2035.
We have many other standards that are currently in development, and I wanted to bring to the attention of the committee that one of the important ways that these are being developed now is through a negotiated process in which the energy efficiency advocates, people, stakeholders such as PG&E and other utilities, and the manufacturers come together to develop a consensus proposal. The Energy Policy Act of 2005 enabled DOE to accept those consensus standards directly into rule, and we have begun to see that move forward in the process. There are a number of negotiations that are currently underway. In the past, these negotiations have been enacted as part of federal energy legislation, and we hope the committee will consider several of the provisions that are currently under development as they look at legislation. This is a very efficient and effective way to bring consensus between the manufacturers and stakeholders and move the market forward together. Second issue I wanted to raise to the committee is building codes. As has been noted, buildings consume approximately 40% of the energy in the U.S. economy, and codes represent the easiest and most cost-effective way for consumers to benefit from energy efficiency. It's important that we continue to revise and look at best practices that exist in terms of building codes, but it's also equally important that we focus on the implementation of the building codes in the marketplace. A building code on the books means nothing if the builders out there in the market are actually not implementing it. And we'd encourage DOE to work with state and local governments to build the capacity both within the enforcement side of this, but also work with the contracting community and building community out there to implement the codes so that the energy efficiency benefits are available to all customers. Finally, on the last area, I wanted to speak about manufacturing. U.S. manufacturing sector is poised for a major expansion and reinvestment, and until recently has not received a lot of attention at the federal level. In particular, would recommend three things that the department should, that the committee should consider. First, we think it's important that the DOE's manufacturing program be re-energized. There's been a lack of leadership for over a decade there, and we think there's some opportunities for it to move forward. Specifically, we would recommend that the department be directed to establish a industrial steering committee to ensure that a strong working relationship exists between manufacturers, the department, and other stakeholders, and that partnership should work to leverage private sector funding. In the past, this program, the R&D area, has been among the most successful R&D efforts in the entire federal government and was able to leverage $3 in private sector funding for every dollar that was spent by the federal government. Second, we think it's important to maintain a balance between near-term R&D, long-term R&D, and deployment. And all of these need to be targeted in cooperation with the manufacturers so that we receive maximum efficiency. Finally, wanted to mention the idea of smart manufacturing. This is, as we look, we've already mentioned intelligence in the marketplace. We think manufacturing will benefit from that and encourage you to direct the department to initiate a smart manufacturing program to explore those resources. Thank you for the opportunity to present and look forward to questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Elliott, and Mr. Gayer with the Brookings Institution. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Chairman Whitfield, Ranking Member Rush, and members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear here today. My comments will cover the market incentives for energy efficiency innovation, the most cost-effective means of reducing pollution stemming from energy use, and the limitations and problems associated with government energy efficiency mandates. First, on market incentives. I believe that market prices are good at conveying information about the strength of consumer demand for a good and the scarcity of supply for that good, allowing for a balancing of buyers' and sellers' interests. In the market for appliances, prices reflect how consumers value features such as energy efficiency and convenience. If the price of energy increases, consumers are willing to pay more for more efficient appliances, providing a clear incentive to suppliers to respond. The importance of energy prices for the bottom line of consumers and businesses provides a strong incentive for producers to provide the innovative energy-efficient products we see arriving on the market today. And these market incentives account for the preponderance of energy efficiency gains that have been mentioned in this hearing today. In addition to providing incentives for energy efficiency, another important benefit of the market process is that consumers with different preferences can find products that best suit their needs. It's important to remember that there is no uniformly right amount of energy efficiency for any given product. However, market prices can provide misleading signals to the extent that they do not account for the pollution costs stemming from energy use. In other words, the price that shows up on one's electric bill accounts for the private cost of energy, but it does not include any additional environmental damages that impact others due to one's energy use. Economists refer to these latter costs as negative externalities. The best approach to addressing this problem is for the government to price these costs directly. Consumers and businesses would then face the full cost of energy use, and markets would respond through some combination of new technologies, alternative fuels, and conservation. There are a number of reasons why this market-oriented approach of setting a price on pollution is more cost-effective than regulations such as energy efficiency mandates. First, the one-size-fits-all energy efficiency mandates ignore the substantial diversity of preferences, financial resources, and personal situations that consumers and businesses must align in order to make their decisions. Second, energy efficiency mandates do not promote conservation. For example, an energy efficiency standard for air conditioners increases the incentive to run the air conditioners longer. Third, energy efficiency standards must squeeze energy reductions out of new products only and can even create incentives for consumers and businesses to retain older and thus less energy efficient products. In recent work I did with Kip Viscusi of Vanderbilt University, we examined a number of recent government regulations that mandate energy efficiency standards for vehicles and appliances. Despite the fact that these regulations frequently are touted as pollution-reducing initiatives, by the agency's own estimates, they confirm that the environmental benefits tend to be quite small and are often outweighed by the costs that they estimate. In order to justify these regulations, the agencies assert that consumers and businesses are making incorrect purchase choices and that they therefore benefit if product choices are restricted to those that meet the agency's mandated standards. Dismissing consumer preferences outright in this way is a significant departure from the well-established principles for conducting cost-benefit analysis, both in the economics literature and, I would add, by the Administration's Office of Management and Budget. By claiming regulatory benefits from the correction of so-called consumer irrationality, agencies are shifting regulatory priorities from the important goal of reducing the harm individuals impose on others through pollution towards the nebulous and unsupported goal of reducing harm individuals cause to themselves by purchasing purportedly uneconomic products. This shift from environmental protection to consumer protection results in a host of costly regulations that are far less effective than a government policy that simply sets a price on pollution. It's important to emphasize that these costs, while these costs are real and that they harm economic well-being, raising the cost of consumer products and products used by businesses through government mandates does not lead to economic growth or job creation. It also establishes a dangerous precedent. If agencies can justify regulations on the unsubstantiated premise that consumers and businesses, but not the regulators, are irrational, then they can justify the expansive use of regulatory powers to control and constrain virtually all choices consumers and businesses make. To summarize, I believe that markets generally work well to provide incentives for energy efficiency and to satisfy consumers' diverse tastes. To the extent that prices fail to incorporate the environmental cost of energy use, the most sensible government response is to price the pollution cost directly and then allow consumers and businesses to respond to the higher prices. Regulations and mandates are inferior policies, but still may be better than doing nothing if the benefits exceed the costs. Unfortunately, by the agency's own estimates, many of these mandates lead to minimal environmental benefits that are far less than the costs that they estimate themselves. In an effort to justify these regulations, the agencies have deviated from well-established economic principles by asserting that consumers and businesses benefit from government mandates that restrict choice. The evidence for this view, I believe, is weak, and assuming that citizens are not capable of making sensible decisions that affect their own pocketbooks is not the right way to advance the important goal of enhancing the quality of our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gayer, and thank all of you for your testimony and once again for being here with us today. Ms. Byrd, I want to ask you a question to start off with. I noticed in your testimony you were talking about the per capita use of energy in California has been flat since 1970. So we're talking about 30 or 40 years. You're talking about the new technologies that have been launched. You talked about the new policies of the government and working with the utilities. You talked about $20 billion in savings. You talked about the lack of necessity to build 25 new generating plants. With all of those efficiencies and everything else, why is it that California electricity rates are among the highest in the country, with the exclusion of Alaska or Hawaii? I mean, you all have been so productive in so many ways. Why is it that electricity rates are so high out there?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question and for the opportunity. California electric rates are high. In matter of fact, they're within the top 25 across the country of major utilities. The bills of Californians, however, are among the lowest. And so I think you have to look at both of those in collaboration.
How is that possible?
Rates,
how does that work?
Well, energy rates in California are higher the more you use. It's an inclining tier structure, and it's designed that way to encourage energy efficiency. The lower rates, though, however, are very comparable to other parts of the United States. And so when we talk about rates, that's one slice of it, but we actually work with our customers to lower their bills. And that's really what they're about. You know, again, we serve about 15 million Californians across northern and central California, and we have a wide variety of customer groups.
What would you say the average per kilowatt hour is for industrial use in California?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have that with me directly, but I can certainly get back to you with that information.
Well, I'm assuming that I mean, I'm not complaining about it or anything, but I'm assuming it must be much higher, because if you have residential use really cutting down on their consumption, and then that's low as the average utility bill in America, that must mean the industrial use must be a lot more expensive.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me clarify a little bit more. We actually have energy efficiency programs that span across all of our customers. So within our energy users that are high industrial customers, our refineries, and we have many in California. We have oil producers in California. We have food processors within our service territory. We have programs that work directly with each of those types of businesses to lower their energy costs.
But even though the individual bills may be low, why is it that the production is so high, the cost?
Well, again, the energy policies across California are designed to encourage conservation, encourage energy efficiency. On the industrial side, however, again, what the industrial customer, and frankly what our commercial customers and residential customers care about, are the size of their monthly bills. And the size of their monthly bills are among the lowest in the nation.
The size of your...
Of their monthly bills. So their usage...
And we're talking about who here now? Residential users?
Mr. Chairman, actually all of our customers, the size of their monthly bills are among the
lowest in the country.
Among the lowest in country. They certainly aren't the lowest, but they are among the lowest.
Mr. Krauts, let me ask you a question. The Section 433 prohibits the use of fossil fuels in new or modified federal buildings by the year 2030 or so. Now, you were testifying on behalf of the Combined Heat and Power Association. Wouldn't a prohibition such as that make it more difficult on the adoption of high efficiency technologies such as combined heat and power for federal buildings?
Well, I think it certainly could. One of the opportunities, though, is to look at biogas or other means of destructing organic waste to use then the fuel or the natural gas, the methane that comes off of the anaerobic digesters, or in some cases syngas that would come from other processes on those bases. The other option would be for us to look at using natural gas as a fuel, as a transition fuel, and look down the road at possibly using those new fuels that come online and the new products that would become available in that time frame to use them, including some of the new biofuels that are looking at being generated from algae and from other sources.
Okay. Oh, Mr. Kosciuszko, my time is running out, but I did pay attention to what you did with Arkema down in my district, the $300,000 annual savings was quite impressive, and I want to thank you for mentioning that. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Rush, for 5 minutes.
Ms. Burt, you talked in your testimony about PG&E's comprehensive approach to energy efficiency, and you included different strata of individuals and demographic groups in your statement. The question that I have is, do some of these outreach programs that you discuss, have you engaged young people, young students in some of this outreach? And could you speak to the educational activities and initiatives that you have with the youngest of our citizens?
Thank you, Mr. Rush. Yes, absolutely, Congressman Rush. Our programs do contain a very large component of education, both primarily in the post-high school area. In fact, we have 3 education centers across our service territory, one in Stockton, one in San Francisco, and one in the East Bay area that are really focused on training and developing even job skills within energy efficiency. We've got the oldest existing training facility in Stockton that's been in place since 1978, and I believe we've trained something in the neighborhood of over 91,000 people to really go out and be productive in the jobs arena around really being energy auditors, installing weatherization, all of the different phases of energy efficiency within those 3 centers. So we have a pretty broad record on that.
So you created some jobs with these programs. I'm trying to focus on young, even younger than high school.
Mm-hmm.
It seems as though the earlier we include energy efficiency and an understanding of the energy demands, energy sector, the energy issues, including costs, but also efficiencies. The earlier we include that in the education of our younger children, the more we change the culture. And I think we'll have some tremendous benefits. Do you engage, say, even at the grade school level?
Yes, Congressman Rush, we do. We have several programs. One of them is our Solar Schools program, where we really engage elementary age students around energy in totality. So renewable resources, the value of solar. We actually install solar panels on schools, and they use them as demonstration and classroom demonstration pieces. We have a number of other classroom demonstrations, both around energy efficiency and energy in general within the school systems that are used throughout our service territory.
In your opinion, how is the federal government faring in these areas? Is there some things that we're doing? Are we doing enough as a federal government to raise the level of consciousness among our grade school level students, high school level students? Are we doing enough as a federal government?
Well, thank you. That's a wonderful point. I think all of us can do more to engage the next generation around energy, and not just energy production, but using energy efficiency as a source of production. And I think learning what new technology, and again, the combining of really the new IT and smart grid with what energy efficiency can do is going to be an amazing future for that generation. I think the federal government can do more. I think we can all do more to encourage education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. This time recognize the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Burgess, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the recognition. Ms. McIntosh, let me ask you, you heard the testimony of Dr. Hogan in the first panel. Do you work with their office, the Department of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy?
We do. All of the member companies of the Federal Performance Contracting Coalition work hand in hand with the Department of Energy. They oversee the indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts that we all operate under to implement energy savings performance contracting for the federal government.
Now, you referenced that there, in fact, was a congressional mandate that required some of this performance standards. Do you recall when that congressional mandate was passed? In your written testimony, you referenced 1986 and said implementation was occurring in the 90s. So I mean, this is a well-established pattern, is that correct?
Correct.
This is not something that's new that should be a that should be a surprise
It
to
should not be a surprise to anyone.
to Dr. Hogan. Well,
Ms. McIntosh, would you mind using Mr. Krause's microphone because we
Is this a little better?
Yeah, that's better.
Whoa, super. And you know, I was making the point that, and not just an academic one, in Congress we get criticized for passing mandates and then not living under them ourselves. I referenced how in my own personal life I've made energy efficiency decisions that were based upon what I would consider would be the correct market signals. And yet we have a great big glorious federal building here, the Rayburn Building, and I'm fortunate enough to have an office here. Yes, indeed, they did change all the lighting around back in 2007 or 2008. But when I look at the biggest source of energy loss, it's got to be those single pane windows that are in existence in the Rayburn Building, in the Cannon Building, in the Longworth Building. I don't get to go over on the Senate side, but I suspect you got the same thing over there. So did you do an audit for the Department of Energy on, say, the Rayburn Building, like we have mandated that other industries do on their structures?
Yes, that is correct, and that was done in the 2008-2009 timeframe. A comprehensive audit was performed for all of the House office buildings. The same was also done for the Senate office buildings.
Well, yeah, we'll ignore the Senate for right now since they're ignoring us. Would it be fair to say that, I mean, lighting, yeah, it's a significant expense. To me, it would have made more sense. I mean, had I been doing this in my private life, and I wanted to change all my lighting, I would have waited till a bulb burned out and then replaced it with an LED or a CFL if that was my inclination. To go in and change all the lights around basically during a congressional recess, I mean, that was a pretty expensive undertaking. I've got no idea what happened to the old light bulbs. I hope they gave them to another country so that they could use them. But it almost seems like that was the obvious, the low-hanging fruit in this endeavor. But if you really want to look at where the energy efficiency exists in an older building like Rayburn or Cannon or Longworth, it's going to be in the window treatments, not in the lighting structures.
Mr. Terry, the beauty of the energy savings performance oh, excuse me, Mr. Burgess.
Just want to fix that.
The direct line of sight. The beauty of the energy savings performance contracting program is that you're supposed to look at things from a holistic standpoint. So energy savings were generated from lighting, certainly, but that was really only one of the many measures that were implemented. The real meat of an ESPC typically is in the places you don't see. It is in the chiller plant, it's in the boiler plant, it's in the direct digital control systems of a facility that measure and monitor and modulate temperature, for example. All of those systems, including water systems as well, were addressed in all of these buildings. You know, that audit that was performed at the time is also intended to be a very comprehensive menu of opportunities that we could implement to generate savings.
Yeah, we're going to run out of time. You notice the chairman has a very quick gavel when it comes to me. But could you perhaps supply my office with that audit and perhaps provide us a little direction as to what has been implemented and what has been what is waiting? Because again, I'd like to give people some reassurance that we're living under the same rules that we're making for other people.
Agreed.
And that the smart thing to do is to respond to appropriate market signals and not to congressional mandates. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. I'm going to yield back the final 2 seconds.
You're welcome, Dr. Burgess. I gave you an extra 50 seconds last time. So this time I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome you to Washington, Mrs. Burt, for your testimony here this morning. I had the the privilege of visiting the PG&E training facility in Stockton with Chris Foster there, it was about a year ago. And it's certainly state-of-the-art. It's very impressive. Do you think that that facility and facilities like that are producing enough trained workers, or is there additional need for additional facilities to meet the market demand right now?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, and it's a delight to be here, Congressman. We're certainly happy to be here from California. That facility in particular, and the other two, the sister facilities that we have, the facility in San Ramon, which really trains and really does a lot of research and work around the food industry and emerging technology, and then the one in San Francisco, which is really focused on architects and building and really design. I will tell you, they are kept consistently busy. And as you mentioned, the one in Stockton has actually been in existence since 1978. And we've produced 91,000 trained workers. Our own workforce, we have about 700 people directly working for my team that do energy efficiency, and then we hire in our communities another 2,000 practitioners within weatherization, and these are contractors, and we train them. We also trained a number of contractors in the most recent funding, the ARA funding that was available. So I must say that we don't find a lack of need for training. There always seems to be. I looked at the Pacific Energy Center just the other day, and I think there were 950 separate classes that were being offered. And I know last year in that facility alone, we trained, and that's, I think, the smallest of our facilities, we trained about 8,000 workers. So it is certainly an area, as energy efficiency becomes more a part of the solution nationally, that we should look at. You know, and I think if we can get to the point where energy efficiency is considered in other places, as it is in California, as a part of the generation mix, just as a generation plant would be, then I think we may need to look at more training facilities.
Thank you. How do you see the EV market affecting PG&E's business plan over the next decade?
Yeah. Well, thank you again. We're very excited about the electric vehicle market. It does have challenges with it because, again, the distribution grid traditionally built across our service territory as well as others is in need of upgrading. We're in the midst of making our grid much smarter to really integrate electric vehicles and other renewable resources, but we're very excited about electric vehicles and what they offer, particularly for the environmental benefits and for our customers' benefits. We know that in our service territory, I will tell you, my customers and your constituents are very excited about using electric vehicles. So I think you can expect to see us do more on that.
Thank you. Mr. Gayer, would you say that big improvements in energy efficiency would have a stimulative impact on the national economy?
I think that market-driven improvements in energy efficiency are good for the well-being of the economy, for sure. When you get to certain programs to stimulate, I think it's a little bit dicier as far as whether or not it's worth the cost. You'd have to really see what's the labor being employed and what would have they been doing otherwise. In a time of great unemployment, I think there's much more evidence that there is such a case. But if you're talking about the long sweep of history, I think the evidence is weaker. But certainly energy innovation and energy efficiency innovation is good for the economy.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott, is there anything that would give us a better return on investment than energy efficiency in terms of energy investments?
Thanks. Congressman, at this point, I think energy efficiency represents one of the best investments that's available in the marketplace. We're in an environment right now, in spite of the current low natural gas prices, where many of the other energy sources are increasing in cost, as has already been noted in the case of gasoline pricing right now. And an investment in energy efficiency represents an opportunity to improve the U.S. GDP by reducing outflow of funds to foreign countries. There's also the issue that investment in energy efficiency makes other technologies equally accessible. For example, investments in energy efficiency can enhance the cost effectiveness of renewable energy by reducing the amount of energy that's required.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much to our panel for being with us today. If I could, Mr. Gare, if I could start with you, and I apologize for my voice, it's allergy season. But I found your testimony interesting because where you're kind of hit home to my district. I represent 60,000 manufacturing jobs in Northwest, West Central Ohio. There's some of our companies are very large, some of them are very small. We have great need for base load capacity out there. And I go through factories, I mean, literally all the time. And probably in the last, I'm going to say 5 months, I've been through about 150 facilities in my district. And I find it interesting, your testimony, when you're talking about, because I hear this from my folks back home all the time, that, you know, they see these mandates coming down from Washington, and again, they're in a global, most of these people are all in a global marketplace, and they're out there very concerned about making sure that they can produce a product that is competitive, that not only in this country but around the world. But in your testimony, I found it interesting you were talking about that you said there are a number of reasons why the market-oriented approach of setting a price of pollution is cost-effective than regulations such as energy efficiency mandates. And you say that the one-size-fits-all energy efficiency mandates ignore the substantial diversity of preferences, financial resources, and personal situations. And I tell you, that hits home to my district. And if I could just ask you then, you know, when you talk about that, you said that you testified that the energy efficiency standards could actually reverse some of the energy savings resulting in negligible environmental benefits. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, sure. First, I think it's important in all these questions to distinguish between, a lot of people are talking about innovation and energy efficiency, and I think that's a good thing. And when it's driven by the market, it's accounting for the preferences and the diversity of tastes and financial circumstances. The problem comes when you have an agency that essentially use imposes mandates and essentially is asserting that certain preferences are in some sense invalid.
Could you give me a couple of examples of
well, I mean, it's a very simple thing. The way you do is these net present value calculations. You look at, the agency will say, well, we think for this appliance, fuel costs are going to be this in the future. We think the appliance will last this long. We think you're going to use it this many times, and we kind of figure out, is the higher cost today worth it for you to get the savings later? But it's not accounting for other characteristics of convenience and feature in your particular circumstance. And this happens, I think, most egregiously when it comes to commercial products. I mean, you have companies that, as I think you're alluding to, that have very narrow profit margins. They're in very competitive industries. Fuel costs might be a huge part of their operating costs, and essentially they're being told you're not doing a good job considering the trade-offs here. And I think my response is, the presumption is they probably are doing a pretty good job of considering the trade-offs, because they have circumstances that can't be measured from the regulator's perspective. And so the presumption should be that they actually know what they're talking about. Again, there's plenty of incentives for energy efficiency for that firm, and I think that's good, but we don't want to, I don't think we should just mandate that, ignore their other preferences, and I think that's what the market is good at accommodating. And my bigger point is, a lot of the text supporting these rules are written from the angle that they're helping the environment, but what I've just described is really consumer protection. It's not environmental protection. It's saying that you are making a mistake by buying an uneconomic product. We, the regulator, are going to correct that. I don't think there's evidence that there's a need for consumer protection, but my point is, that's a very different thing than designing a regulation to say, hey, we've got to worry about pollution. You have your circumstances, but you're not considering that you're emitting pollution. Let's address the pollution, and you wind up with very different regulations.
Let me follow up what you just said when we were talking about consumers. You know, what's best for the consumers out there then? The energy efficiency improvements from market forces, or energy efficiency from the regulators?
Oh, well, certainly the former, because the former actually considers, they get to consider the other trade-offs and the other characteristics that either drive their consumer preferences, or in the case of businesses buying these products, their bottom line. Essentially, that's the premise. Is I'm better at spending money that affects my bottom line than somebody else is, and the presumption should be that. Again, if you're trying to address environmental externalities, which I alluded to, I won't consider that in my consumption decision. And that is, I think, a strong role for the regulator there. But there needs to be a distinction between, are we trying to protect the environment, or are we really just doing consumer protection?
But I think that, again, when I'm going through my facilities back home, that the folks back there, they're worried about that bottom line. And, they all want to make sure that there's clean air and clean water. And at the same time, they want to make sure they're providing the jobs out there for the people in the communities, because that's absolutely essential. And, Mr. Chairman, with that, I thank you for your indulgence, and I yield back.
Thank you. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Energy efficiency standards set a minimum floor for the efficiency of appliances and other products. Over the last 25 years, these standards have played a key role in improving the efficiency of appliances we all have in our homes. They save consumers billions of dollars every year by lowering utility bills. But some economists argue that energy efficiency standards are a bad idea. They say that the costs of the standards outweigh the benefits and that they reduce consumer choices. They also argue that any cost-effective efficiency measures would be taken anyway, even without the standards. And Mr. Gayer made these arguments today. Dr. Elliott, what do you think? Do the costs of these standards outweigh the benefits, or do consumers come out ahead?
Congressman, I want to say that in our view and based on our research, the consumers do come out ahead. And I think we can get some very good examples on this. Perhaps one of the longest regulated products in the marketplace is the refrigerator today. My wife and I had the opportunity to replace one recently, and the number of choices that we had in buying this one compared to the one we bought 25 years ago, the amenity values, the cost, were all substantial. In addition,
let me ask you this. Do the standards reduce or increase consumer choice?
I think our experience, at least looking at things like lighting products, looking at things like automobiles, looking at things like refrigerators, washing machines, they've increased our consumer choice. We have more options. We have more amenities. Part of this is a simple fact that we've stimulated the manufacturers to redesign products which they have no motivation otherwise to redesign.
You in your testimony talked about huge savings for major efficiency improvements. Would we have seen benefits in the absence of efficiency standards, or are there market barriers that would have prevented cost-effective efficiency improvements from being made? You talked about an incentive for manufacturers. Are there barriers to them, or they just don't think about it because they don't have to?
I mean, I think it's a complex issue, and then as with most things, these are not simple decisions. A lot of this comes down to information. And we talk about in an economic environment where we have perfect information. Consumers don't have perfect information. Mm-hmm. They have lack of information. They are not given or don't have access or the time. We call that transaction cost. Mm-hmm. To be able to make the choices that may.
But how about the choices the manufacturers make? Are there barriers to them making efficiency choices?
Absolutely. Part of it is there's no change in the marketplace. In the case of a manufacturer, if we have a static situation in the marketplace and there's no dynamic there, they're not going to necessarily innovate. And so the opportunity, I think, is standards allow them to innovate. And we've seen over the last 25 years and the manufacturers of products that are regulated by standards coming to understand that in many cases they've been beneficial to the marketplace.
Great, thank you. Ms. Burt, PG&E has a lot of on-the-ground experience implementing programs to incentivize energy efficiency. Do consumers take every cost-effective energy efficiency measure on their own, or are supporting policies necessary?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. We would agree that supporting policies are necessary, and in fact, we do make many of our programs available directly to the consumer. We also give them a lot of information. But that simply alone doesn't do the trick. We also have incentives to manufacturers. So, for example, in the manufacturer that's manufacturing a refrigerator, our goal in California, as you probably know, is to work collaboratively with manufacturers across the country.
And you've done that very well. I'm sort of moving forward because I only have a limited time, but I wanted to,
ask you, first of all, you testified PG&E efficiency programs resulted in energy savings that saved your customers $20 billion and avoided the need to build 25 large power plants. These efficiency initiatives are cheaper than building new power plants, aren't they?
Yes, sir, they are.
And what is PG&E's experience with appliance efficiency standards and state building codes? Are these onerous government mandates, or are they cost-effective ways to drive energy efficiency improvements?
Well, thank you. Our view of codes and standards is they're a part of the portfolio of energy efficiency. We work on codes and standards. We work upstream with manufacturers. We work with cities. We work with governments to create incentives before the standards are set. So it's not as though the standard is set first. You know, our view of the world is let's incent the more energy efficient refrigerator, more energy efficient television, and then let the standard evolve as the market pulls. And that's really been very effective in California, as you know.
Well, I commend you for what you've done in California. Thank you very much.
Gentleman's time has expired. I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Olson, 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman, and welcome to the witnesses. You start here in the morning, now it's the afternoon. So thank you for your time, your expertise, most importantly, your persistence. Mr. Kosisko, I'd like to thank you for helping me to tour ABB's facility in Houston last year. In your testimony, you mentioned barriers to investment in industrial efficiency, lack of a clear business case, inadequate funds or financing, and a general lack of information. Could you expand on what NEMA and IEC are doing? Is there a particular success story that stands out to you?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. NEMA, IEEC, and ABB are all working within the industry to increase awareness, which I think is one of the key impediments to adopting energy efficiency technologies into the industrial space. Let me give you an example. If you look at a typical industrial motor, for instance, that industrial motor, over its life cycle, 2% of its total cost to operate is the initial purchase price of that motor. 97% of the cost is the energy utilized over its lifetime. But yet there's decisions made on a daily basis by various industrial customers on the initial procurement price of that motor. And I think it's widely made because of a lack of understanding and general information available. NEMA at IEEC, within ABB, we do a lot to promote awareness and improve visibility of the types of products and systems and services that will help in industrial energy efficiency. Another example, we have a show each year, Automation and Power World, that we sponsor at ABB, where we bring in over 2,000 industrial users into a conference. We have over 400 seminars. A good portion of those seminars are focused on energy efficiency and the types of products, systems, and services and other methods that could be used within the industrial environment to reduce energy consumption and make industry more competitive here in the United States.
Not a lot of questioning. Being from Texas, one thing I worry about is our grid reliability. Our state, our margin for excess capacity is very slim now. And that's largely because of overregulation by the Obama administration, our fastest growing population, and conflicting federal agency laws that force a power provider to choose between one agency and another in direct conflict. I've introduced a bill last Congress, this Congress, to address that factor. But I'm intrigued by the Volt AR grid optimization technology you have. Can you tell me how that would work to improve the efficiency of the electric grid and improve grid reliability?
We have several technologies that help actually improve the efficiency of transmission and distribution of power and grid reliability. One of the most predominant is our high voltage direct current technology and the transmission of energy. This allows for much lower losses in the transmission of high voltage across longer distances and helps us to better connect the grid, whether it's with traditional power sources or whether it's with alternative power sources and renewable power sources. So that's just one example. It typically reduces losses by about 10%, which certainly is a terrific improvement when you look at the amount of energy that gets transmitted across those lines. We also provide software that helps manufacturers and grid utilities to better manage the grid, improve its reliability, improve demand response, so at peak seasons or at peak times during the day, we could better produce energy in a more effective way with lower cost fuels and better fuels. Just a few examples. So we have several technologies in that space.
Thank you. And my final question is for you, Mr. Cruz. In your oral testimony, you mentioned the federal government picking winners and losers in the energy sector, largely through the RFS, Renewable Fuel Standards, as a challenge to combined heat and power. And I'm also aware of a company back home called TAS, which faces similar challenges. They're trying to do a waste heat to power model of operations. Can you briefly describe the differences between combined heat to power, waste heat to power, and microturbines?
Certainly, I'll try. Thank you for the question, Congressman. You know, waste heat to power is typically taking a existing thermal energy source and using it in a device to generate additional electricity or make useful, products or energy out of it. Microturbines and other CHP generation technologies are very similar in how our products are applied. We install the generator, and then the thermal energy is used typically inside the facility of the host client to increase the overall efficiency of the plant. So we're able to use the electrical energy and the thermal energy to make hot water, steam, chilled water. One of the challenges we faced is the evaluation is far more complex for CHP than it is for changing light bulbs or putting in high efficiency motors or VFDs. So the challenge is customers tend to shy away from more complex transactions and or payback scenarios than the simpler ones. And that's one of the uphill battles that we have.
Yep, thanks, sir. I'm out of time. Yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. This time I recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, an observation. I had heard so many comments here today about from the panel about let the market rule, let the private sector be the agents of change, and that things will happen. And I find it interesting. There was a great call for policies, for standards, for regulation, for incentives, for codes, for implementation of those items above, and calling for investments and R&D appeal. So I think it's a very telling statement here today. I would first go to Ms. McIntosh, please. You state in your testimony that the barriers to increased usage of ESPC are difficult to quantify. I would ask, what role do energy prices play in a decision to use an energy savings performance contract?
It's a very good question. Energy prices obviously dictate the breadth with which we could apply an energy savings performance contract to a facility. Because all of the project implementation costs and care and feeding of an ESPC are covered by the energy savings and the energy cost savings that are generated by those improvements. The areas where you have high energy rates are obviously going to have an easier time of doing a performance contract than areas where energy rates are more competitive.
And then how are the changes in energy prices through the term of a contract addressed? How do those changes get incorporated into the contract?
What we do in the course of developing an energy savings performance contract is a lot of historical analysis of how energy rates have changed for that particular customer over time. And then we utilize a lot of sources through Department of Energy, through NIST and other areas on what forward projections are supposed to be. And then we look to put together a conservative value on what we believe the energy prices are going to be, a floor, if you will, to utilize throughout the term of the contract.
Back in my New York State days working with energy policy and implementation, we held a hearing with data centers. Do you see the application with data centers being a real thing?
We're just starting to see that as a real possibility in energy savings performance contracting because of their high energy draw. And there's an awful lot of technology advancement that's happening in the IT and data center arena. So it certainly is an opportunity for us to incorporate ESPC in that market.
Thank you. And Mr. Kraus, the barriers to expanded deployment of CHP may be many, but finding the upfront capital, I have to believe, is a big thing, the capital investment. Have the energy savings performance contracts been used much by the private sector to install CHP?
Certainly. We have customers that use the energy savings model in the private sector as well as in the government sector to deploy our technology and other CHP technologies.
And where in our industrial applications do you see some of the best opportunities?
I think in any customer that's using thermal energy, hot water, steam are the easiest sort of customers. Food processing, cheese, customers that are in the plastics business are natural targets for us. Those are on the industrial side, some of the low-hanging fruit, if you will.
And Mr. Elliott, I assume some of the resistance to new product efficiency standards is the cost to manufacturers of altering their product's design and manufacturing process. What is the experience that you have with the product vendors in terms of perhaps incorporating the message for efficiency standards?
There absolutely is a significant transaction cost for a manufacturer when they do re-engineer their products or re-engineer their products to incorporate energy efficiency. That said, that also gives them the opportunity to revise their manufacturing processes. For example, in the electric motor industry, when we saw motor standards come in, we saw a consolidation of motor designs by the manufacturers and implementation of flexible manufacturing. So this actually allowed them to produce a higher quality product that was accepted by the marketplace as on the basis of its performance. So yes, there was cost incurred by the manufacturers, but what it did was really allow them, in the case of the motors, not only produce a product that met the customer's needs better, but also allowed them to compete globally against many of the low-cost producers who were not able to produce the product of similar performance.
Thank you. And Ms. Burt, just a comment to your earlier statement. Consumers don't pay rates, they pay bills, so I appreciated the statement that was made. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. This time recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will follow up on some comments that were made earlier and maybe even in the previous panel for some of it. I would like to say I'm going to ask you a question in a minute about that Christiansburg facility, but I do look forward to going up there and seeing it in action at some point in time, but I'm going to get you to do a little science on it for me, Mr. Kraus. Before that, I'd like to say to you, Mr. Kosciuszko, thank you so much for having a facility in the 9th District of Virginia. It's doing great work there, and our biggest problem is that because it abuts a mountain, we've got to find space to expand, and I hope that it will still be in the 9th District of Virginia, but we don't have that many flat places. But anything I can do to help you all find facilities for the current facility or anything else you'd like to move to my district, I'm more than happy to do, and appreciate all the work that you're doing. Ms. McIntosh, I'd like to get a copy of the inventory or survey of the buildings on at least the house side as well. I love the windows, but I agree with Dr. Burgess. There's got to be something we can do a little more efficient than the current windows that we have. And I will confess that I like to open those windows from time to time, particularly when the weather's nice. And I'd hate to lose that, but also I understand that we got to have some energy efficiency. That being said, going back to a previous panel, I would comment that I do worry a bit about not having buildings that breathe a little bit, because then the indoor air pollution does go up, as Mr. McKinley pointed out, and so that's something we do have to put in the overall equation. Mr. Kraus, coming back to you, I would ask so that you can explain it to me, because I'm not an engineer. I was a lawyer before I came to Congress. You've got a 65 kilowatt microturbine installation at the town of Christiansburg wastewater treatment plant, and you indicated in answers to questions earlier that a lot of the facilities where these are located, they use it on site. I'm trying to figure out how and they may not, but does Christiansburg use that energy on site, or does it, do they wheel it off somewhere else?
Oh, thank you for the question, Congressman. They certainly use it on site. Wastewater treatment plants are unique in that they do a lot of water pumping. They also use the thermal energy to heat the digesters. So especially in the winter months, to keep the chemical composition and temperature correct in the digester, they use the thermal energy from their CHP system. And then the electricity is just reduces the amount of purchase power that they have from the utility, because typically they do not generate enough digester gas to supply all of their electrical requirements at a wastewater treatment plant.
All right, thank you very much. I should mention that ABB does a lot of, when I toured their facility there in Bland, I did note that they pointed out a lot of things that they were doing to keep their energy costs under control and to be very efficient at that facility. I would also have to note that I went back for, I don't know, my second or third tour to the large Volvo facility in my district, and they're doing all kinds of things. They've got a couple of windmills, they've got solar panels, they've installed passive solar in a number of places where because they are skilled at doing a lot of these things, they've actually done a lot of it themselves. But the one that I found the most interesting that I think that folks maybe want to pay attention to is that somebody on their team, they have suggestion boxes and give out rewards. Somebody on their team figured out that because they have 2,000 plus people who are captive in the factory, they all know where the drink machines are and where the snack machines are, and so they took the light bulbs out of them, and they were really surprised at how much electricity they saved. So when we're talking about efficiencies, sometimes simple things work very well in that regard. Mr. Gare, I've only got a minute left, but I was wondering if you could comment on refrigerators, since that came up earlier, because one of the things I've noticed is that while I think we all ought to have the most efficient equipment that we can have, if you've got a refrigerator that's struggling on, you might stay there if the cost is high to do something else. And a lot of the innovations I've seen have been technologically driven as opposed to energy efficiency, because I can't imagine that water and ice in the door as opposed to having to reach inside is a whole lot more efficient. Maybe it is. Can you expand on that and
Yeah, a
help me
few
out?
things. One is I agree with Mr. Elliott. The choice has expanded over the last few decades in all appliances, but I think that is market-driven and certainly not due to mandates, which by their nature restrict choice. And you're exactly right. One of the reasons these don't work that effectively or cost-effectively to reduce energy is because people sometimes hang on to their older products longer, especially if it's a big-ticket item, and it's going to cost more money due to a new regulation.
And do you have any data that would indicate how much the price of a percentage-wise or otherwise, how much the price of a refrigerator has been impacted by?
I don't have it with me. There is a literature primarily in the vehicles, and when it deals with vehicles too. This is always an impact. Whenever you raise CAFE standards, you have to worry about you get a slower turnover of the fleet, and new vehicles tend to be more fuel efficient. I don't have the numbers offhand though.
All right, thank you, sir.
Gentleman's time has expired. At this time, I recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps, for 5 minutes.
I want to thank the chairman for calling today's hearing. Thank you to all of our witnesses for a long day of testimony. I think it's a great topic. Increasing energy efficiency is critical to our nation's energy future. And it's clear from today's testimony that the private sector is doing a great job of innovating and bringing new energy efficient technologies to customers. But the federal policy, I believe, also plays a critical role in this process. Neither the federal government nor the private sector on its own does as good a job as we want to have done when they all work together. But working together, these public-private partnerships can lead to great advancements that create jobs and can save consumers money, but also spur innovation and benefit the environment. I see it every day back home in my district on the central coast of California. I represent 2 world-class research universities, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and the University of California at Santa Barbara. Research conducted at these public universities is frequently spun off into very successful local companies, which I have visited, like Sora and Transform, many others. These companies continue to innovate and develop new technologies, and they're creating jobs at the same time, spurring economic growth. So my first question is to you, Mr. Kraus. Your company is similarly innovating and staying at the forefront of your industry. In your testimony, you mentioned federal R&D funding as an important contributor to your company's growth. Could you elaborate on this just for a minute, because I want to do other questions too, but how has Capstone benefited from federal R&D funding?
Thank you. And I'll be as quick as I can. We have several programs currently that we're working towards efficiency and reliability. So through the DOE, we have a 250 and a 370 kilowatt microturbine that we're developing that will improve the electrical efficiency of our product and broaden the number of applications it can go into to get higher overall efficiencies. And then we're working on other fuel types, syngas and other things. Some of our original technology was developed in cooperation with the public sector as well.
So you're a good example for the rest of us.
Yep.
My second question goes to you, Ms. Bird. Of course, these energy-efficient technologies not only create jobs and support small businesses, but they also benefit consumers. I want to focus on this intersection between technology and energy and how it really makes a difference in the lives of the people, and that's actually the bottom line. Ms. Bird, we all know how these technologies can reduce energy use in our homes and businesses and lower costs for consumers. But I'm curious about the efficiency improvements being made to our energy infrastructure. For example, could you discuss what efficiency technologies PG&E is deploying on the infrastructure side and how this is going to benefit consumers in the long run?
Thank you. That's a very good point. Again, this is the intersection between technology and energy, and it is very evident in the smart grid that's being deployed. Within California in our distribution network, we're deploying a device called a FLISHER, and it's not a very catchy name, but it stands for Fault Location, Isolation, and Service Restoration. And it literally takes any kind of interruption along the circuits that have the device from being a typical 1 to 2 hour outage to being less than 5 minutes. And as we deploy those, we've deployed about 135 circuits are completely deployed to date. By the end of this year, we'll have 400 circuits deployed. And I'm really happy to say that in 2012, we had the highest reliability we've experienced in the history of our company. So we're quite pleased with how intelligence and energy efficiency works within the grid as well.
And when that disruption in service happens, you know, there's a ripple effect on how it impacts your customers. Finally, Ms. Bird, I want to touch on a key point that you made in your testimony about energy efficiency training. PG&E's, and I'm thinking about the facilities I have in my district. Your Pacific Energy Center has been training students in energy efficiency for many years. I'm curious about the demand for this kind of training. Have you seen enrollment in your training courses increasing in recent years? If so, why do you think that is? In other words, is this catching on?
Thank you, Congressman. I do believe that we have seen enrollment increasing, particularly with the ERA funding and the weatherization and the cities and counties and the jobs that were created within the state of California. Our role in that, we weren't a part of the funding, but our role in that was to train and properly train the workforce. So we have seen a consistent increasing interest in these sorts of jobs because they are very relevant.
And I saw this firsthand during the recession, the weatherization of older homes. What is it that any structure that's over 10 years old, maybe it's even less than that, it can benefit cost-wise, bottom line-wise, and then you can train unemployed people, give them a job. It's not very sophisticated in many ways, coming around just on older homes, putting in more efficient window sills, and the win-win with more people working and then lower energy costs for maybe a couple living on a fixed income. It does really, over the long haul, really impact. Thank you very much for your time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for coming in. We appreciate it. As has been discussed today by our first few panels, improving energy efficiency in America will play a pivotal role in increasing U.S. energy productivity and making America more energy secure. The benefits from implementing energy-saving techniques and technologies are felt by nearly every part of society through higher productivity, reduced energy costs, lessened environmental impacts, and a return of billions of dollars to our economy that was previously going to waste. As we move forward to promote adoption of energy-saving technologies and improve awareness of their benefits, promoting the facts outside of the light of partisan politics will be crucial. Recently, it was my honor to be nominated to serve as an honorary vice chair to the Alliance to Save Energy, a bipartisan group of members of Congress, corporate CEOs, and organizational leaders focused on promoting the benefits of energy-saving technologies and encouraging their adoption. I'm excited to be working with this diverse group and believe it can serve as a model for problem solving across partisan divides, which we kind of need nowadays. At this time, I ask unanimous consent that the Alliance Commission on National Energy Efficiency Policy Energy 2030 report be included for the record.
Without objection.
The benefits of adopting energy-efficient technologies are undeniable. Congress must work to educate consumers and businesses to these benefits, allowing for the private sector to move forward, upgrading our energy infrastructure. I want to commend private industry for taking the steps to ensure energy efficiency. I particularly want to thank the pay TV industry, which includes cable operators, bell companies, satellite providers, and consumer electronics manufacturers for their agreement announced last year that makes sure consumer set-top boxes are even more energy efficient. This is a great precedent for the private sector stepping up to the plate and doing the right thing without government mandates. Mr. Kosisko, in your testimony, you mentioned a 2011 study by the Economist Business Intelligence Unit in which businesses were asked to identify the main barriers to investment in industrial energy efficiency. By far, the most popular response was a lack of clear-cut financial case for the energy efficiency investments. How can government work with organizations and companies like yours to get out the facts and make the clear-cut case for companies to make energy-efficient upgrades?
Thank you, Congressman. You know, as I mentioned before, I think that education, I think that promotion and creating visibility in the marketplace is going to be crucial to us moving forward. Certainly, you know, there's a competition for capital. When you look at private investment in industrial companies, they're going to make decisions based on how they can most effectively use the capital over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. And some of these technologies have longer payback periods. So I think that it's important that we provide the level of education so that they can make targeted decisions in certain technologies that will have shorter payback periods, produce results for them in a shorter time frame. But also, I think that we need to look at what we can do in a smart way to promote them in using these technologies that may have longer payback periods, but will be crucial for us in maintaining our competitiveness from an industrial perspective in this global economy.
Well, thank you, and I think even having these hearings are a good start. Mrs. Burton, your written testimony, you commend the work and recommendations of the Alliance to Save Energy's Commission on National Energy Efficiency Policy, which issued a report, Energy 2030, highlighting several policies concerning existing technologies for policymakers to consider. Of those recommendations to increase energy productivity is for the government to lead by example. You also mentioned that Pacific Gas and Electric Company is currently completing a project for NASA Ames Research Center near Mountain View, California. This project encompasses more than 100 buildings and covers in excess of 2.5 million square feet and allow NASA to save 9 gigawatt hours of electricity, 1.3 million therms of natural gas, and more than 15 million gallons of water annually. With results this substantial, could programs with similar amounts of savings be duplicated at other federal agencies? If so, what are the main challenges that we face in doing that?
Yes, thank you, Congressman. They absolutely can be duplicated. In fact, we have 3 currently underway and 11 that we're hoping to move forward with within our service territory. What are the main area of improvement is really in the contracting. What we've found is that as we work with NASA Ames, the VA, the IRS in Fresno, the FAA in another part of our service territory, it's a complete recontracting process. So if we could find some sort of simple standardization for these sorts of contracts, for the utility services contracts, I think that would benefit both sides significantly.
That sounds great. And perfect time, too. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kinzinger. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Illinois for an additional question.
Ms. Bird, I just have one quick question. I'm very impressed with what PG&E is doing in California. And are there similar programs that you are aware of in Illinois or Chicago in terms of your training programs?
Thank you, Congressman. I'm just not that well versed in Illinois. I am very, very, very well versed in California, but not in Illinois.
Thank you all very much, and before we conclude, I'm just asking unanimous consent that the following materials and statements be entered into the record from Arkema Corporation, American Chemistry Council, the Alliance for Industrial Efficiency, Heatis Power Association, and Pew Charitable Trust. Without objection, I would enter these into the record. Thank you all once again for your time and traveling to come to Washington. We appreciate your testimony, and we look forward to working with all of you, and hope the next time we have a hearing on efficiency, which we will soon, that we'll have just as many people stay throughout the entire hearing. So thank you all very much, and with that, the hearing is adjourned and the record will be open for 10 days.
Good job, well done. Let's have
I guess not.